Chapter 1. Midnight at number 17 Primrose Lane. A pale moonlight draped the wrought iron gate of number 17 Primrose Lane in silvery lace. As though nature herself were eager to inspect the secrets within, the once stately townhouse, its foyer now streaked with the faintest trace of ivy, sat in silence, an unlikely stage for the calamity that was about to unfold. All was still, save for the distant tinkle of a clock tower marking the stroke of midnight. Inside the drawing-room's amber lamplight cast long shadows across polished mahogany and crimson velvet upholstery. Lady Rosalind Evesham, renowned hostess and pillar of London society, stood rigid by the mantel, her pale fingers tightening round a crystal decanter of red armagnac, her eyes, usually bright with laughter at her lavish soirees, when are wide with horror. It's impossible, she whispered to herself, though her voice carried enough for the solitary figure beside her to catch every tremor. That figure was Captain Arthur Bancroft, a retired cavalry officer whose broad shoulders and weathered face spoke of campaigns in distant lands. He held a small brass key, its purpose unknown to any, at its owner clutched so tightly that the metal rim bit into his palm. Across the hearth, the portrait of Sir Reginald Evesham, Rosalind's late husband, gazed down with painted solemnity, as though appalled by the current household's turmoil moments earlier. The household staff had vanished like spectres. Miss Agnes, the parlour maid, had fled upstairs with a shriek. Mr. Hawkins, the butler, had dropped his silver tray and bolted toward the kitchen door, and cook's heavy footfalls retreated down the back staircase. No one, it seemed, dared remain. In the presence of Lady Evesham's discovery, "You must see for yourself, Captain," Lady Evesham insisted at last, her voice brittle. "Come before I lose my senses entirely." He nodded once, curtly, and followed her across the oriental rug. The drawing-room's double doors led to a narrow corridor, at the end of which lay the study, a dark sanctuary of leather-bound volumes and a grand writing desk. As they stepped across the threshold, Rosalind struck a match, illuminating the scene with trembling hands. There, atop the desk, lay the body. A single crimson stain spread across the antique blotter, its edges congealed. A silver-mounted fountain pen rolled off the desk, its cap uncapped as if dropped mid-sentence. Lady Evesham's breath caught in her throat. Captain Bancroft hesitated only a moment before approaching, his military training evident in the careful way he skirted the pool of blood. No sign of forced entry, he murmured, kneeling to inspect the blotter. He sniffed the air, faint hints of almonds and lavender. Poison, perhaps the telltale scent of cyanide. Rosalind shuddered. My husband, my dear Reginald's portrait. He would not rest easy. Her lip trembled as she gazed at the blotter's message, still faintly visible beneath the bloodstain. For words, scrawled in elegant handwriting at midnight, "The roses speak." Captain Bancroft frowned a little. He reached out, almost touching the lettering, but drew back as though stung. "Here, in your late husband's study, his roses," Lady Evesham whispered, voice barely audible. "He was obsessed with his rose garden, a dozen cultivars he tended himself. He believed they could divulge a family secret he never shared publicly." Bancroft rose and turned toward the window. Outside, a single dog-rose bush scraped the panes with its thorny branches, petals fluttering in the night breeze. At that moment, neither of them noticed the glint of white gloves as they slipped away into the darkness beyond the drawing-room, one last witness fleeing the aftermath. A sudden rustle from the door drew their attention. The handle turned slowly. They braced themselves as the door swung inward, revealing a diminutive figure framed by the hallway's pale light. Hercule Poirot. His mustaches were immaculately waxed into twin crescents, and his eyes small, bright, ever-observant, took in every detail with the efficiency of a fine Swiss watch. "Madam," he said in his lilting accent, bowing slightly, "I trust. I am not intruding." Rosalind's relief was almost audible. "Monsieur Poirot, thank heaven you've come." She stepped forward, hand outstretched though she fought to steady it. "There has been a tragedy." Poirot's face remained composed, but his eyes began their rapid, systematic dance from blotter to key in Bancroft's hand. From the pool of blood to the upturned crystal decanter, tragedy indeed. He murmured, "Pray, Captain Bancroft, what have you discovered?" Bancroft recounted what he could: the absence of forced entry, the signs of poison, the cryptic forward message. Poirot listened without interruption, nodding occasionally, as though each revelation were perfectly placed, piece on a complicated chessboard. When Bancroft finished, Poirot allowed a moment's silence to settle like dust on the furniture. Then, with the delicacy of a surgeon, he lifted the fountain pen with gloved fingers. The nib bore a single fleck of crimson. He turned it so that the light caught its silver trim. He said softly, "This pen is no ordinary instrument. Madam, do you recognize its maker?" Rosalind's brows rose. It was Sir Reginald's favourite, a gift from his sister, Lady Montfort, handcrafted by Schaff of Vienna. Poirot smiled, a gesture so slight it might have gone unnoticed. "Precisely, and yet here it lies, uncapped, as if the writer never intended to place it back." He set the pen aside and moved to the blotter, kneeling. He traced a fingertip along one edge where the paper met the wood. "Observe, Captain, the cut is uneven, deliberate. Yes, the blotter has been replaced, but not positioned correctly." Bancroft exchanged a glance with Lady Evesham. "So someone staged the crime, tried to make it appear a suicide, but fled." In haste, Poirot rose, smoothing his impeccably tailored waistcoat. "In haste indeed. But our culprit is not so clumsy as to leave no motive. Madam, do you recall if any letters or documents were missing from this desk?" Rosalind shook her head, lips pale. "I cannot be sure Reginald stored many private papers here, but nothing of great value was taken, to my knowledge." "Then our murderer seeks something less tangible than gold, perhaps a secret contained." Only in words. Poirot turned back to the room, surveying the leather volumes lining the walls. His gaze paused at a book left ajar on a lower shelf, or something concealed behind words. "Captain, would you be so kind as to fetch the library ladder?" As Bancroft disappeared to comply, Poirot stepped to the window, peering out at the moonlit garden, his reflection moustaches, monocle. The imperious tilt of his head revealed a captain of intelligence at work. The roses outside quivered in the breeze, their petals whispering mysteries that only he could decipher. Turning back, Poirot spoke quietly, more to himself than to those in the room. "Number 17 Primrose Lane holds many secrets. At midnight, the roses speak, but whom are they addressing? And what secret did Sir Reginald know that his killer cannot afford to share?" In that precise instant, as if summoned by Poirot's question, a faint clicking echoed from the study's inner door, a sound unnoticed by Lady Evesham, but noted by Poirot's sharpened ear. He raised a single finger. "Captain, Madame, there is yet more to learn. The game has begun," and with that, Monsieur Hercule Poirot's investigation into the affair at number 17 Primrose Lane was officially and irrevocably underway. Chapter 2. The first close morning sun had scarcely begun its slow ascent when Hercule Poirot returned to the scene of the crime. The drawing-room and study remained untouched since the previous night, preserved by the staff in reverent fear. As he entered, Poirot's keen eyes flicked from the overturned blotter to the single silver fountain pen resting on its side. Captain Bancroft and Lady Evesham watched him expectantly. "Madam," Poirot said, inclining his head. "We must proceed with the utmost care. Every detail is a clue, no matter how insignificant it may seem." Lady Evesham nodded, her composure restored by Poirot's calm authority. Bancroft produced a small notebook. "I have recorded what I observed last night," he said, "but I confess I may have overlooked some particulars of the timeline." "Captain," Poirot replied, "we shall reconstruct events meticulously. Tell me again, at what hour did you arrive at Primrose Lane?" Bancroft consulted his notes. "I reached the front gate at 11:15 p.m., Madame's invitation in hand. The servants admitted me promptly. Lady Evesham led me to the drawing-room, where we conversed until midnight, when she escorted me to the study, and at precisely midnight you discovered the body." Poirot confirmed. "Excellent. Now, observe this blotter more closely." He knelt beside the desk, eyes narrowing as he examined the wood grain and paper alignment. "The blotter is too far forward by roughly half an inch, and its top edge is at a slight angle. Someone replaced it hastily, without regard for order." Lady Evesham shuddered. "My husband was always so precise. He would have noticed immediately." "Indeed," Poirot murmured. He rose and approached the mantel, where the crystal decanter still stood upright, though its contents were half gone. "Notice the decanter. It bears no fingerprint save for these." He tapped a faint smudge on the glass, "and these." He pointed to minute droplets of ammoniac on the mahogany. "Those droplets suggest the decanter was lifted and set down once no more. Our culprit drank from it, or used it as a prop, then fled." Bancroft frowned. Could the murderer have intended to poison Lady Evesham instead? An interesting hypothesis, but unlikely. Poirot replied, "The poison was administered directly in the study. Observe here." He lifted the blotter's corner and revealed a thin smear of lavender-scented oil beneath, a scent not native to this household. "This oil is not part of Lady Evesham's usual perfume. It suggests the hand that replaced the blotter wore gloves previously, treated with lavender. Could be a woman's glove, perhaps." Lady Evesham's lips paled. "My gloves, none of mine, smell so strong." "Then our suspect is not you, madam," Poirot said gently. "Next." The fountain pen. He retrieved it and removed its silver cap, revealing the nib. "See here. A single fleck of gold-colored dust clings to the nib's edge. Gold dust is used in gilding. To whom among your associates does this point?" Rosalind hesitated. "My cousin, Lady Montfort, dabbles in bookbinding and gilded calligraphy. She once offered to commission a new family album." "Precisely," Poirot said, returning the pen to its place. "Lady Montfort arrived by carriage last evening at 10 o'clock. She remained in the drawing-room until just before midnight, then retired to her suite on the second floor. That detail is confirmed by Mrs. Hawkins, the head maid." He motioned to Captain Bancroft. "Kindly fetch Mrs. Hawkins." Moments later, the butler appeared alongside the housekeeper. Poirot outlined his observations: the displaced blotter, the lavender oil, the gold dust. Mrs. Hawkins stiffened at the mention of Lady Montfort, but maintained her composure. "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot," she said, "Lady Montfort wore lavender gloves last evening, and I noticed her wiping something on the blotter after tea service." Poirot smiled. "Thank you, Mrs. Hawkins. You have been most helpful. Now, another clue." He stepped into the corridor and pointed to a cluster of crushed rose petals in the corner, white dog rose petals, identical to those in the bush outside. "These were not here last night. Someone passed through, brushing against the rose bush, and neglected to clean the petals." Bancroft knelt to examine them. "They lead toward the back staircase." "Exactly so. A hasty exit," Poirot said. Yet the murderer chose the front door of arrival. Curious, let us continue. He followed the trail of petals down the hallway to a small landing where a pair of gloves lay discarded. Poirot picked up a single glove, its lining stained faintly with ink. This, madam, is your husband's writing glove, he said, handing it to Lady Evesham. She recognized it immediately. Yes, she said, voice trembling. He often wrote in that glove to protect his desk blotter from smudges. Notice the ink stain, Poirot said. It is not Reginald's dark blue ink, but black, a different ink entirely. Someone used your husband's glove to write or handle documents that did not belong to him. Lady Evesham's eyes filled with tears. He would never have touched another ink, even by accident, than our murderer did. Poirot concluded. A misdirection. Use Reginald's glove to suggest suicide or mistake, while masking their true purpose. He placed the glove carefully in an evidence tray. Now, one final early clue. The brass key Captain Bancroft found at the scene. Bancroft produced the key, its twin ridges gleaming. What does this open? Lady Evesham frowned. I believe it unlocks a small safe hidden behind one of the lower shelves in the study. Only Reginald knew which shelf. Let us verify. Poirot guided Bancroft to the bookcase whose shelves had been meticulously catalogued. A slight gap between volumes on the bottom row caught his eye. He pressed against the spines. The entire shelf swung inward to reveal a concealed safe. With steady fingers, Poirot inserted the brass key. The tumbler clicked, and the door swung open. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with a black ribbon, along with a small leather-bound journal. Poirot selected one letter and unfolded it. This, he announced, is not a love letter, nor a routine business communication. It is a letter of substantial consequence, a confession of a wrongdoing dating back 20 years, and it is addressed to you, Madam. Rosalind's face betrayed both shock and dread. To me. But Reginald never showed me this. Poirot glanced at the page. The letter implicates a person of high standing, one who fears exposure. Note, the seal. He turned the letter to reveal an embossed family crest unlike that of Evesham or Montford. Does any guest possess such a crest? Poirot asked. Lady Evesham shook her head slowly. Not in my immediate circle, but Sir Lionel Carrington, my late husband's old friend, bears a crest similar to that. Sir Lionel Carrington. Poirot repeated. He arrived last night, unannounced, to lodge his condolences on your husband's passing and to pay respects. Yet here lies evidence of his potential motive to silence Reginald. He refolded the letter and placed it back in the safe. We must question Sir Lionel forthwith. Captain Bancroft looked to Lady Evesham. Shall I send for him, please? She nodded as Bancroft left to fetch the guest. Poirot turned to Lady Evesham. Madam, these first clues paint a tangled web. Lavender-scented gloves, gilding dust, torn petals. A misused writing glove, and a secret letter of confession. Each suggest a different suspect, each a different motive. He paused, stroking his mustache. But only one truth underpins them all. We proceed carefully, Madam, lest our murderer anticipate our moves. Outside the window, the roses in the moonlight seemed to tremble anew, as though stirred by Poirot's words. Within the walls of number 17 Primrose Lane, doubt and fear entwined, and the first clues of a deadly intrigue had only just been laid bare. Chapter 3. The gathering of suspects be mid-morning. Number 17 Primrose Lane buzzed with quiet activity. Servants in muted livery had been dispatched to fetch the evening guests, those whose presence at last night's fatal gathering had been incidental, yet whose motives now demanded scrutiny. In the drawing-room, Lady Rosalind Evesham stood by the window, clasping a lace handkerchief as though it were a talisman against despair. Captain Bancroft lingered at her side. His broad frame a bulwark of steady assurance amid the household's tremors. Poirot entered, his sharp gaze sweeping the room. "Madam, Captain," he said, smoothing the lapels of his coat, "we shall convene the suspects here. Pray, allow me to set their introductions." At that moment, the double doors opened and Mrs. Hawkins, the housekeeper, ushered in their first visitor, Lady Montfort, tall and elegant, her auburn hair swept into a neat chignon. She floated into the room as though governing her grief with practiced poise. Her lavender-scented gloves were conspicuous by their absence, a subtle dishonour of mourning protocol. She curtsied to Lady Evesham. "Rosalind, my dear," she murmured, voice soft yet meticulously measured, "I came as soon as I heard." A flicker of tension passed over her features as she caught Poirot's eye. Next arrived Sir Lionel Carrington, tall, with iron-grey hair and a stern countenance. His dark mourning coat contrasted with the pastel drawing-room. He gave Lady Evesham a brief bow, lips pressed into a thin line. In his eyes lay both sorrow and calculation. "Lady Evesham," he intoned gravely, "I offer my deepest condolences. Reginald was a dear friend." But his posture was rigid, his glance darting toward the concealed safe's location, as if fearing the discovery of its contents. Captain Bancroft cleared his throat. "Monsieur Poirot, with your permission, I have informed the other guests of the events. They will arrive shortly." Before Poirot could reply, a soft knock preceded the entrance of Dr. Beatrice Sinclair, the local physician, a woman of slender frame and keen eyes. She carried herself with the authority of her profession. Her white nurse's scarf peeked from beneath her tailored coat. "Dr. Sinclair," Poirot greeted, "your insight into last night's events may prove invaluable." He noted the doctor's calm demeanor, yet the slightest tremor in her fingers. As she set down her medical bag. At a second knock, Mr. Harold Kemp, a solicitor for the Evesham estate, entered, nervous and perspiring. He held a leather briefcase close to his chest. His spectacles glinted in the lamplight. "Good morning," he began in a high-pitched voice. "I've drawn up the necessary probate documents, but of course, this unforeseen tragedy changes everything." Poirot observed him quietly, as though mentally ticking off each wrinkle of anxiety. "Thank you, Mr. Kemp. We shall have opportunity later to examine those documents." Finally, the most unexpected rival, Miss Celia Brackenridge, Lady Evesham's long-time governess and confidant, poised and dignified, she carried an air of quiet authority. No one had sent for her. She had come of her own volition. "Madam," she said softly to Lady Evesham, "I could not bear to remain idle in the face of such sorrow." Her gaze lingered on the safe's hiding place, a glance so swift that only Poirot's practiced eye perceived it. Poirot cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. I regret the circumstances, but necessity dictates that we proceed at once." He drew the group to the center of the room. "Last night, Sir Reginald Evesham died by means foul and deliberate. My investigation has uncovered these facts. The poison was administered in this study. A cryptic message was left on the blotter, and a hidden safe revealed documents of great import." He paused, letting his words sink in. The assembled suspects exchanged furtive glances. Lady Montfort pressed her gloved hand to her chest. Sir Lionel straightened his shoulders. Dr. Sinclair's calm forehead cracked for half a breath. Mr. Kemp swallowed audibly. Mrs. Brackenridge inclined her head slightly, as though calculating her next move. "Each of you," Poirot continued, "had reason to be present here on the night in question. And each of you may hold a key to solving this crime." He turned first to Lady Montfort. "My lady, you arrived at 10 o'clock. You wore gloves scented with lavender, and your craft in gilding was evidenced by gold dust found on the fountain pen. Tell us, to what purpose did you handle Sir Reginald's pen last evening?" Lady Montfort's lips parted, but her voice remained controlled. "I merely borrowed it to inscribe a condolence note. I would never—" She paused, glancing at the safe's hidden location. "I would never harm him. He was my brother-in-law and dear friend." Poirot inclined his head. Understandable. Yet the glove impression and gold dust suggest more than perfunctory use. "We shall revisit this later." He turned to Sir Lionel. "Sir Lionel, you came unannounced to extend sympathies. You share a family crest with that on the letter found in the safe, a letter naming you in a confession of past wrongdoing. Can you explain your presence here at such late hour, sir?" Lionel's eyes flickered, but his voice was steady. "I feared the news of Reginald's death would embolden those who wished to expose me. I wished to confront him privately, nothing more." He paused. "I admit I had spoken tersely with him this afternoon upon hearing of his wish to publish certain memoirs, but I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, that conversation took place hours before the tragedy." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Memoirs indeed. Those memoirs concern a matter you fear to be revealed." Sir Lionel's throat worked once, but he answered, "Personal matters best left private." He looked away. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Then addressed Dr. Sinclair. "Doctor, you arrive at midnight, ostensibly to tend to the body. Yet I observe that the poison used cyanide requires precise handling. You carry both knowledge and the instruments to deliver such a dose silently. How did you come by your medical kit so swiftly?" Dr. Sinclair's composure returned. "I was on call. When Mrs. Hawkins sent for me, I came as a matter of duty. Reginald's health had been delicate of late, heart trouble, you know. I suspected he might have had a fit and taken his own life out of despair." She offered that explanation with apparent sincerity, but her eyes betrayed a hidden calculation. Poirot raised a delicate finger. "A curious theory, Doctor. Given the omens scent present at the scene, rarely associated with heart ailments and more, commonly with cyanide, we shall test your hypothesis, of course." He turned to Mr. Kemp next. "Solicitor, Reginald's estate is in your hands. You prepared his will only last month. Yet no will was found in the safe, only letters of confession. Could it be the will was removed?" Mr. Kemp's face blanched. "I do not know. The will is a sealed document, secured in my office. You may examine it there." His hands shook as he spoke. Poirot inclined his head. "We shall indeed. Lastly, Mrs. Brackenridge, you claimed no summons, yet you arrived here against Ememy, Eversham's wishes. You knew where the safe hid its treasure. How did you learn of its location?" Mrs. Brackenridge gave Lady Eversham a swift glance, then turned back to Poirot. "I served as Sir Reginald's secretary in his youth, before entering the household. As governess, I learned many of his secrets, including the safe's hiding place. I came to protect his memory and to offer my assistance." Poirot observed her with polite interest. "Protect his memory. Yes, but one must ask, what truth do you wish to protect? And what might you hide yourself?" Silence fell. Then Lady Eversham, regaining her composure, spoke. "Monsieur Poirot, these accusations are grave. I beg you to proceed with discretion." Poirot bowed. "Of course, madam. Yet discretion need not impede truth." He stepped back, folding his arms, as he considered the assembly before him. "We have 6 suspects," he mused aloud, "each with motive, each with opportunity. We shall question you individually in turn. I ask that you remain available and refrain from leaving Primrose Lane until I have concluded my inquiries." As the group dispersed, Lady Montfort to the left, Sir Lionel to the right, Dr. Sinclair checking her medical bag, Mr. Kemp clutching his briefcase. and Mrs. Brackenridge, slipping quietly to a rear corner Poirot, remained at the centre of the room. His moustaches twitched thoughtfully when Captain Bancroft returned with fresh tea. Poirot poured himself a cup, then raised it in a silent toast to the unspoken game outside. The roses quivered in the breeze, petals drifting like whispered secrets. Within the grand walls of Primrose Lane, the suspects had been gathered, and the true trial of souls was only just beginning. Chapter 4. Poirot arriveth. Afternoon light slanted through the tall windows of number 17. Primrose Lane, casting long, lattice-shaped shadows across the drawing-room floor. Hercule Poirot sat in an armchair facing the gathering of suspects, his gloved fingers steepled beneath his chin. Round him, the assembled company maintained an uneasy silence, each mind busy weighing alliances, recalibrating suspicions, and wondering how much of their own secrets the famed detective had already uncovered. Poirot's keen eyes drifted slowly from Lady Montfort, her brow furrowed, gloved hands clasped in her lap, to Sir Lionel Carrington, whose rigid posture betrayed tension. In the corner, Dr. Sinclair tapped one foot beneath her skirt. Mr. Kemp adjusted his spectacles for the third time, and Mrs. Brackenridge stood near the doorway, her once mild expression now inscrutable to one untrained. The tableau might seem merely courteous deference to a man of Poirot's renown, yet within each polite gesture lay a subtle attempt to mask guilt. "Samus," Poirot began, his voice mellow yet incisive, "you have graciously offered your time, and for that I am most grateful. But the case demands we delve deeper, for beneath the pomp and protocol lie the hearts of those who would cloak their motives in civility." He rose and approached the mantel, where the crystal decanter stood nearly empty. Picking it up, he swirled its remaining armagnac and sniffed. "Notice, please, that the liquor is not wholly consumed. The victim had no reason to sip from this cup except as a ruse to suggest a self-administered dose." Poirot set the decanter down with a soft click. Yet the poison was applied not here, but in the study. The decanter was a prop in a stage scene. Lady Montfort's pale fingers hovered over her lavender gloves, now resting on her lap. "Prop," she repeated, voice trembling. "But who would? Someone seeking to divert suspicion," Poirot interjected gently, "and someone who knew the layout of this house intimately enough to sculpt such a tableau." He strolled across the room, pausing by the bookcase behind which the hidden safe had been discovered. "Observe the books," he said, running a gloved hand along the spines. "Most are catalogued with meticulous care, except these few, which are slightly misaligned." He plucked 3 volumes and tapped the shelf to remove the safe's cover. "One needs only nudge these books to one side." Our murderer did so in the darkness. He straightened the shelf, aligning the volumes. "Precisely. A man might neglect such nuance in panic, but a woman trained in precision such as a bookbinder would remember to replace the volumes exactly." His eyes flicked to Lady Montfort. "She is skilled in bookbinding," Captain Bancroft observed quietly. Poirot nodded. "Indeed. But let us not prejudge. Now, the roses." He crossed to the window overlooking the garden. The single dog rose bush bore fresh blushes of petals scattered upon the lawn last night. Someone brushed against this bush, leaving fragments on the floor. He held up a petal for all to see. Yet no one reports returning via the back stairs except Mrs. Brackenridge. "Madam, you serve as governess and often cross this threshold. Pray, explain your movements." Mrs. Brackenridge straightened. "I sought to retrieve a document from Sir Reginald's desk, then returned to the drawing-room to inform Madame Evesham. I saw nothing amiss until the cry." Poirot inclined his head. "And yet you declined to fetch Captain Bancroft immediately, choosing instead to remain within earshot." He leaned closer. "Why, The governess's lips tightened. I feared alarming Madame Evesham unduly. I watched from the corridor to ensure no one else tampered with the scene. Admirable caution. Poirot replied, but regrettably, I find it unconvincing. He turned away, addressing the group generally. A crucial observation: the murderer wore 2 pairs of gloves, one lavender-scented, leaving traces on the blotter. Another finely tailored leather glove found, with ink stains on the lining. He tapped the glove in the evidence tray. Who among you possesses such gloves? Sir Lionel shifted. I rarely wear gloves indoors. Dr. Sinclair spoke next. Voice calm. I use leather gloves when handling medical instruments. 2. Maintain sterility. True, Poirot conceded, though ink stains are not often present in surgery. He paused at the table where the fountain pen lay. This pen, gifted by Lady Montfort's sister, bears gold dust, yet only one among us works with gilding. He allowed the implication to hang. Lady Montfort's cheeks flushed before she could respond. Poirot lifted a small brass key from the table distinct from the safe's key and turned it in his fingers. This key, he regarded each suspect in turn, belongs to a bureau in the East Wing, used by Lady Evesham to store personal effects. It was found on the study floor. He closed his eyes momentarily, as though recalling a distant memory, after last night's reading of the letter in the safe. Someone sought to retrieve another document from that bureau, but which of you, fearing discovery, dropped the key in haste? Mr. Kemp swallowed. I went to collect Lady Evesham's private tool from that bureau, and found none. Poirot said softly. Curious, is it not? Yet the key proves an attempt, Lady. Evesham's voice trembled. I did not know the will was missing. Ah, but you knew the letters. Existence, Poirot observed, and you knew its contents would shatter reputations. His spouse might be tempted to interfere for love or for protection. Rosalind's eyes filled. My love was profound. But I ask you, Monsieur Poirot, would I murder him to spare his family shame? No. Poirot's gaze flicked to Sir Lionel. Yet you had equal cause. Sir Lionel Carrington, long entwined in Reginald's affairs, your crest upon the letter. You feared publication of past misdeeds. Yes, sir. Lionel's jaw tightened. I did not kill him. I only wished to persuade him against the memoirs. Persuasion can take many forms, Poirot murmured. He turned back to the group. And then there's Dr. Sinclair, silent in voice but knowledgeable in poison. The doctor's composure remained unbroken, though her lips pressed then. You arrived after the body was found, yet your bag contained an empty vial of labeled cyanide discontinued. Dr. Sinclair inhaled sharply. I used it in my last case, monsieur. I thought to examine the cause of death myself, doctors. Curiosity that might expose you to suspicion, Poirot said, and Mrs. Brackenridge trained in the study's inner workings and Mr. Kemp closest to the will. Each of you stands accused by motive and opportunity. A hush fell. Then Lady Montfort spoke, voice quivering but firm. Monsieur Poirot, you paint us all as villains. Poirot smiled gently. Madam, the truth is seldom polite, yet by your faces I read no confession. That is encouraging. My task now is to probe personal histories and unearth the secrets that link each of you to Sir Reginald's fate. We shall begin individually. He raised a hand, 3 slender fingers extended. First, Lady Montfort, I wish to inspect your personal effects. Bring your lavender gloves and any bookbinding tools you possess. Lady Montfort inclined her head. As she turned to retrieve her gloves from her reticule, Poirot's moustaches quivered ever so slightly, his little grey cells working at top speed, weaving each clue into the tapestry of revelation. Outside, the roses stirred in the breeze. their petals like silent witnesses to a mystery that would not rest until the murder was unmasked. Within the venerable walls of Primrose Lane, Poirot had arrived not merely as observer, but as arbiter of hidden truths, his investigation now entering its most intimate phase. Chapter 5. Initial interviews begin. Monsieur Poirot rose with deliberate grace and turned to face the gathered assembly. Mzamas, the time has come for a private discourse. I shall speak with each of you in turn. In the study, pray, do not depart from this house until I have summoned you. His voice was firm but courteous, leaving no room for protest. Lady Montfort was the first to step forward. Poirot led her through the corridor to the study's anteroom, where a single armchair and a side table with refreshments awaited. He gestured for her to be seated. The lavender-scented gloves lay on the table, along with a small leather pouch containing gilding tools. Madam, he began, you claim you used the fountain pen only to write a condolence note. Yet gold dust was found on the nib, and your gloves bear faint traces of lavender. He held the gloves up between gloved fingers. May I ask, did you visit the study more than once after tea service? Lady Montfort's auburn curls trembled slightly. Only twice, she said. First, to deliver the note, then again because I misplaced the pen and wished to return it to Sir Reginald's desk. Her eyes flickered toward the hidden safe's location. I did not. I did not know of his other papers. Poirot inclined his head. Understandable. Yet witnesses state you wiped something on the blotter. What did you wipe? Madam, she drew a shallow breath. An ink smudge on my fingertips. I did not wish to soil the blotter. Her voice quavered, but her posture remained erect. Very well. Poirot noted the precise way she pressed her palms together, as though forcing calm. Madam, may I examine your reticule? Lady Montfort hesitated, then opened it. Inside lay spectacles, a handkerchief, and a small ticket stub to a private rose exhibition held in Kensington the previous week. Poirot removed the stub and examined it. Interesting, he murmured. This exhibition featured dog roses, the same variety found in your garden. He placed the ticket on the table. You admire these blooms last night. Petals were brought indoors. He let the implication hang. Lady Montfort swallowed. Perhaps I brushed against the bush earlier, she stammered, but I returned directly here. Poirot smiled thinly. I thank you. Madam, you may go. Lady Montfort departed, smoothing her gloves as she left. Next, Sir Lionel Carrington entered. Poirot closed the door behind him. The former naval officer stood stiffly, hands clasped before him. Sir Lionel, Poirot began. You arrived unannounced, bearing grief and apparently a secret to keep. The letter in the safe bore your family crest and detailed a crime to decades past. Why did you not disclose this to Sir Reginald sooner? Sir Lionel's jaw clenched. Had I known he intended to publish these memoirs, I would have implored him. But I did not foresee this tragedy. Poirot studied Sir Lionel's face, noting the tightening round his eyes. Yet tonight you wished to confront him privately. You feared revelation more than loss of friendship. He paused, then pointed to a faint stain on Sir Lionel's cuff. Pardon me, this marking or perhaps something else. Sir Lionel wiped at his sleeve. Ink. I assure you, I opened the letter, perhaps carelessly. Perhaps. Poirot allowed a polite silence. You removed the safe's contents, including letters. Then you dropped the key to the bureau. He held the brass key aloft. Why retrieve the will that does not exist? Sir Lionel's colour drained. I wished to secure any documents linking me to that confession. Only then did I realize the will he had disclosed to me earlier was already removed by another. Poirot nodded. I see. You thought yourself the sole party concerned. Yet someone else had equal motive. He tapped the key against his palm. Thank you for your candor. Sir Lionel turned to leave, shoulders stiff as a ship's mast in gale, leaving Poirot to reflect on the residue of ink and guilt. Dr. Beatrice Sinclair was next. The physician entered with her ever-steady composure. Poirot gestured to a small table where she placed her medical bag. "Doctor," he began, "you suggest Reginald's death was natural or self-inflicted, yet the onset and lack of medical signs contradict that." He leaned forward. "Tell me why you possessed discontinued cyanide vials." Dr. Sinclair's calm demeanor cracked ever so slightly. "They were relics from my academic days," she said. "I kept them as reference, so no malicious intent." Poirot's tone remained gentle. "Then explain the empty vial missing its label." The doctor's breath hitched. "I used it for demonstration at a recent lecture. I disposed of the empty vial afterward. Even so, one would not carry it on one's person during a house call unless prepared." Poirot studied, her eyes prepared to diagnose or to perpetrate. Dr. Sinclair drew in a slow breath. "Monsieur, I love my profession. I would not betray its trust." Poirot inclined his head. "Perhaps not. Yet trust must be earned." He opened her bag, revealing surgical gloves and bandages. "No additional vials." He closed it. "Thank you. You may return." Mr. Harold Kemp stepped in next, visibly uneasy. His spectacles slid down his nose as he seated himself. "Monsieur Kemp," Poirot began, "you manage Sir Reginald's estate and prepared his latest will. Yet the will was not in the safe. Instead, letters of confession were found." Kemp's forehead glistened. "I had removed the will for amendments. I intended to return it before yesterday's gathering and forgot." Poirot's eyebrow rose. "Or were you interrupted?" Kemp swallowed audibly. "I was called away unexpectedly. I meant to return, and you bore the bureau key," Poirot said softly, holding up the brass key. "You intended to secure the will, yet discovered nothing." Kemp's shoulders sagged. "Yes, that is." So Poirot allowed a moment's silence. "One final question. Did you know of the letter in advance?" Kemp's Adam's apple bobbed. No." Poirot studied him, then smiled faintly. "Very well." Finally, Mrs. Celia Brackenridge entered. She looked composed, though fatigue lined her eyes. Poirot gestured to a chair. "Madam," he said, "you have served this household long and loyally, yet you knew the safe's location and remained near the corridor instead of alerting help." Mrs. Brackenridge's lips pressed into a thin line. "I feared startling Lady Eversham. I waited an appropriate moment." "Appropriate," Poirot echoed. "When the body lay in silence, he leaned closer, or when you could tamper with evidence unobserved." Her gaze flickered, but she held his eyes. "I did not tamper." Poirot removed his monocle and polished it. "I shall test that, madam." He replaced it. "You knew of Reginald's past, your confession of service dating to youth. What other secrets do you guard?" She drew in a breath. "Only those of my conscience." Poirot inclined his head. "We shall see." He rose and opened the door for her to leave. Alone in the anteroom, Poirot sat and steepled his fingers. Each interview had revealed more fissures than facts, contradictions, and timings. Overlapping motives, shared knowledge, yet no single testimony. Resolved the web of clues. Opening his notebook, he listed lavender gloves, gold dust, ink stains, rose petals, cyanide vial, misplaced key, missing will, secret letter. As the door clicked shut, Poirot murmured, "The first interviews have begun. Yes, but the heart of this mystery remains concealed. We must press on." Outside, the roses bowed in a gentle breeze, petals drifting like whispered confidences. Within the walls of Primrose Lane, Poirot's investigations had only just begun. Chapter 6. The first false lead late afternoon found number 17 Primrose Lane cloaked in overcast light, the sky a muted slate as Poirot stood before the study door, his posture radiant with focused intent. Inside, Captain Bancroft and Mrs. Hawkins hovered anxiously over a small worktable, upon which lay paperwork, a tabletop blotter, several photographs of the crime scene, and a fresh sheet of paper ready for notation. Poirot entered. Closing the door gently behind him, he began, examining the collection. We have now conducted our initial interviews. Each suspect possesses both motive and opportunity. Yet in every tangled thread, one leads us astray, a false lead that must be dispelled before true progress can be made. He dipped a slender finger into an inkwell and set it aside. Let us consider our most glaring hypothesis, that Lady Montfort is our culprit. Bancroft exchanged a glance with Mrs. Hawkins, her gloves, the gold dust, her proximity to the safe. He began, but Poirot raised a hand. Precisely, Poirot agreed. A convincing case, Samus. Yet not conclusive. We must test the hypothesis fully. We shall reconstruct her movements from 10 o'clock until midnight, and see whether they truly place her at the scene of the act. He turned to Mrs. Hawkins. Madam, gather the household staff. We shall have them verify Lady Montfort's timeline. The housekeeper bowed and hurried away. Poirot and Bancroft retreated to the drawing-room. Poirot stood by the window, peering through the gauzy curtains at the rose garden beyond. The petals still wet from a passing drizzle. He tapped the windowsill. The roses will speak again. But we must first focus on Lady Montfort's whereabouts. Moments later, the butler, Miss Agnes, and two footmen assembled, standing in a row. Poirot moved among them, his gaze flicking from uniform to uniform. You will each recount your last sighting of Lady Montfort, he instructed. Miss Agnes, the parlour maid, stepped forward. I served tea at 10:15, monsieur. Lady Montfort sat in the drawing-room. Near the east window, she conversed with Sir Lionel Carrington until about 11. She hesitated, then she asked to be excused, saying she needed fresh air. And you saw her leave the room? Poirot asked. Miss Agnes nodded. Yes, but only for a moment. She returned almost immediately, and we resumed service of Petit's force. Poirot arched an eyebrow. And the lavender gloves, did she remove them at any point? Miss Agnes thought for a moment. No, monsieur, she kept them on throughout. He turned to the footman. One. Thomas spoke up. I delivered a message to Lady Montfort at 11:15, monsieur. She was in the corridor outside the library. She opened the door for me. I did not see her re-enter the study. Poirot's eyes sparkled. The library, you say, and how long did she remain there? Thomas shrugged. Perhaps 10 minutes, monsieur. I heard quiet music, perhaps on the gramophone. Then she came back to the drawing-room. The other footman, Edward, added, I saw Lady Montfort at 11:45, walking in the conservatory. I thought she might be upset, so I gave her space. Bancroft frowned. Conservatory. That contradicts the notion she was in the study to handle the pen. Poirot nodded. Yes, and there are no rose petals in the conservatory, only marble floors. Her gloves would have remained clean there. He glanced at Bancroft. We must inspect her gloves. Back in the study, Poirot retrieved the lavender-scented gloves from evidence. He held them up to the light, turning them this way and that. Note the condition. Pollen of an indoor orchid, perhaps from the conservatory's orchids rather than rose pollen. He tapped the fingertips, and no traces of green stains that rose stems would leave. He placed them back in their tray. Impressive, monsieur, said Bancroft. It seems Lady Montfort could not have brushed against the rose bush. Indeed, Poirot said softly, Our initial theory of her guilt is invalid, but let us not exonerate her, fully merely recognize that she is not the architect of this crime. He turned to Bancroft. Now, cross-reference the suspect's testimonies. Who else mentions the conservatory? Captain Bancroft consulted his notes. Sir Lionel said he saw Lady Eversham showing a newspaper clipping to Dr. Sinclair there. He thought to join them, but then was called elsewhere. Poirot's eyes lit. A newspaper clipping. Dr. Sinclair. This merits closer examination. Let us find the clipping. He returned to the worktable alongside Mrs. Hawkins, there, neatly stacked. Lay a copy of yesterday's edition of the London Gazette alongside. A printed obituary for a Sir Reginald and a small scrap of clipping marked with a pin. Poirot plucked the clipping free. It bore a headline, Alleged Financial Misconduct. Sir Reginald Eversham named in investigation. Poirot smoothed the edge. Financial misconduct, involving stock manipulation years ago, that is not in the memory of the household. Dr. Sinclair had no known interest in finance. Why would she have this clipping? Mrs. Hawkins cleared her throat. Dr. Sinclair borrowed the newspaper from me in the morning. She asked to read the business pages before her rounds. Captain Bancroft swallowed. But a clipping like this might provide motive. He glanced at Poirot. Are we now suggesting she had financial motives? Poirot's moustaches twitched. We must follow the paper trail, Captain. Yet this clipping points to a false lead, an assumption that Dr. Sinclair, by virtue of possessing the clipping, was intent on framing a financial motive. He attached the clipping to a new sheet and labeled it false lead. Financial motive. Then he looked up. But the clipping does not prove intent to kill merely to know. We must test her alibi. He pressed a button on the desk bell. Mrs. Hawkins, please see Dr. Sinclair and Sir Lionel to the drawing-room. The housekeeper bowed and left. While waiting, Poirot studied the blotter's cryptic message. At midnight, the roses speak. He traced the letters faintly with a finger. Roses speak. Roses speak. He murmured. What might that imply? The rose garden is but one place. Could the roses speak by way of their petals that deliver a message in their scatter? He looked up as Miss Agnes entered with Dr. Sinclair and Sir Lionel. Both sat stiffly in armchairs facing him. Poirot sat at the edge of the table. Samus, we discovered a newspaper clipping in your possession, Dr. Sinclair, suggesting Sir Reginald was under financial suspicion. Pray, tell us why you marked that article. Dr. Sinclair drew in a breath. I thought it newsworthy. I was concerned for my patient's reputation. Her voice was steady, but eyes darted to Sir Lionel, who looked back with an inscrutable expression. Poirot leaned forward, and Sir Lionel, he said, directing his gaze, you mentioned seeing Lady Eversham and Dr. Sinclair together in the conservatory, discussing this very clipping. Why did you not mention this earlier? Sir Lionel cleared his throat. I didn't think it relevant until now. Yet you had concern. Did you not? Poirot pressed. Your finances, your position tied to Reginald's reputation. He paused. Dr. Sinclair. Your medical bag contained no further cyanide. Yet you were present in the conservatory at 11:45, only 15 minutes before the murder. What did you do in those minutes? Dr. Sinclair's fingers curled into her lap. I stepped away to gather my thoughts. The news was distressing. Sir Lionel's voice softened. I waited for you, Beatrice, but you did not return immediately. I assumed you'd gone to compose yourself. He looked at Poirot. I did not suspect anything more. Poirot regarded them both. We will verify your stories. Mrs. Hawkins will confirm whether you returned to the drawing-room when asked. He turned to Mrs. Hawkins, who nodded and departed. Poirot rose. So we see our financial motive is a tantalizing distraction, but a red herring. We must not let it lead us astray. Our suspect is skilled in misdirection, layering motives like petals in a bud, so that the true sender goes unnoticed. He gathered his notes. We shall revisit the physical clues. Let us examine the study again at dusk, when shadows grow long. The roses outside may yet reveal their secret. Captain Bancroft inclined his head. A wise plan. Poirot stepped to the window, looking out at the grey sky where the drizzle had ceased. He inhaled deeply, as if drawing in the mystery itself. At midnight, the roses speak, but until then, the crime speaks for itself. He turned to the assembled company. We press on with clarity, leaving false leads behind. The real culprit awaits exposure, and so the first false lead was laid to rest, its petals scattered upon the path of Poirot's methodical reasoning. Yet beneath its detritus lay the promise of deeper revelation secrets that only the little grey cells could unearth. Chapter 7. The Psychological Gamut that evening. As a hush settled over number 17 Primrose Lane, Hercule Poirot summoned the suspects once more to the drawing-room. The lamps were lit, casting a warm glow on the velvet drapes and polished mahogany, while outside, the rose garden lay silent under a crescent moon inside. An undercurrent of tension rippled through the assembled company as each took their accustomed seat. Eyes flitting nervously, Poirot stood before them, hands clasped behind his back. Mzemus, he began softly. Tonight we play a psychological game, a test of wills, if you will. He paused, allowing the words to resonate. I shall engage you in conversation, placing subtle provocation traps of the mind. Your reactions shall reveal truths hidden beneath polite facades. He turned first to Sir Lionel Carrington. Sir Lionel, tell us of your friendship with Sir Reginald. You spoke of shared naval exploits, yet I found your knowledge incomplete. Which campaign did you command together in 1905? Sir Lionel's face tightened. He cleared his throat. That was the West African Patrol, I believe. He glanced at Dr. Sinclair before recovering. Yes. The West African Patrol, Poirot, inclined his head. Indeed. Yet your service records show you were stationed in Gibraltar at that time. Curious that you omit such detail when reminiscing. Sir Lionel's jaw whitened. I was attached to intelligence in 1905, not on active patrol. I thought it unimportant, Poirot said, folding his arms. Unimportant to you, perhaps, but to one who values precision. He let the question hang. Sir Lionel sat back, shoulders rigid, and said nothing further. Next, Poirot addressed Dr. Sinclair. Doctor, you tend to fear. You arrived after the body's discovery, professing medical curiosity, yet you brought no instruments beyond those for diagnosis. Strange for one claiming professional interest. Dr. Sinclair's lips pressed then. I did not wish to appear invasive. I preferred to observe. Observe, Poirot repeated. Is a gentle word for intrusion. You were the man to love. Healer, yet your stethoscope finds no heartbeats, only opportunities to learn of weakness. He paused, watching her breathe shallowly. The doctor's eyes darted to Lady Eversham, then to the door. Before she regained composure, I am no murderer, Monsieur Poirot. Precisely my point, Poirot said softly. Your defense is swift, but your heart betrays doubts. He shifted his gaze to Mr. Kemp. Mr. Kemp, you manage estates and assets, yet your attention to Sir Reginald's will was tenuous. You misplaced the document on the eve of tragedy. Awkward for someone whose livelihood depends on order. Mr. Kemp's spectacles fogged as he swallowed. I was under stress. The will required amendments. Plausible explanation, Poirot conceded. Yet when the amended will was gone, you quickly sought the bureau key in the dock. He held up the brass key. Fear of financial repercussions can inspire desperate acts. He watched Mr. Kemp's hands twitch. Kemp flushed. "I did not kill him." Poirot inclined his head and turned to Lady Montfort. "Madam, though we dispelled you of the first false lead, your gilding tools and expertise in precision remain suspect. Yet it was not your gloves that brushed those petals. Perhaps you know more of Reginald's secrets than you admit." Lady Montfort's composure wavered. Her eyes glistened as she replied, "Reginald and I were close once, but I loved him like a brother. I would not harm him." Poirot's moustaches quivered. "Love and harm are not always mutually exclusive. Protectiveness can be a subtle poison." He allowed the accusation to rest in the stillness. Finally, he faced Mrs. Brackenridge. "Madam, you who served Reginald for decades, you know his routines intimately. You knew his safe's hiding place, and you lingered outside the study while the body lay within." "Why?" Mrs. Brackenridge inhaled slowly. "I wished to spare Madame Evesham and Duchoc. I stayed hidden until the proper moment." "A noble sentiment," Poirot replied. "Yet could it be to conceal your own apprehension?" "You have smiled at Sir Lionel's discomfort earlier as though trusting an ally." Her gaze flicked to Sir Lionel, then back to Poirot. "I trust no one here." Poirot's eyes softened, then sharpened. "And yet, trust can bind as surely as a chain." He paused, surveying the group. "Now, for the trap." From his pocket he withdrew the fountain pen found at the scene. "This pen, madam," he said, turning it slowly, "was used to write the final 4 words on the blotter. At midnight. The roses speak. I ask each of you, did anyone here recognize that phrase before last night?" Silence fell. Each face betrayed fleeting surprise. Lady Montfort's brow creased. Sir Lionel's lips pressed tight. Dr. Sinclair's hand tightened on her armrest. Mr. Kemp's foot tapped. Mrs. Brackenridge closed her eyes for a heartbeat. Poirot continued, voice barely above a whisper. A phrase so obscure would reside only in one of 2 places: Sir Reginald's Jew, Vernal hidden with his papers, or an unpublished poem by Lady Evesham herself. He looked at Rosalind, seated awkwardly at the edge of the circle. "Lady Evesham, you once penned verse for your late husband's birthday. Could this be your composition?" Rosalind's cheeks drained of colour. She gazed at Poirot, her voice trembling. It was but a private rhyme. I never thought it. Yet it bore weight enough for our murderer to use it as message." Poirot turned back to the group. "Who among you knew of this secret poem?" Sir Lionel's eyes flicked to Dr. Sinclair, who met his glance and then looked away. Mr. Kemp swallowed audibly. Lady Montfort's gloved hands clenched briefly. Mrs. Brackenridge remained stony. Poirot tapped the pen against his palm. "One of you betrayed your knowledge." He fixed his gaze on Dr. Sinclair. "Doctor," her face flushed. She rose abruptly. "I confess. I once found Lady Evesham's draft among her papers when I assisted her with tea service. I read the lines fanciful, but touching." She sank back. "I meant no harm." Poirot inclined his head. "Admirable curiosity. But it provided our murderer the script for a misdirection." He placed the pen on the table. "Thus, we see the mind trap laid. The culprit relied on knowledge of a private rhyme to divert suspicion. Toward Lady Evesham, he steepled his fingers and surveyed the suspects, observed the reactions. Some maintained composure, others betrayed anxiety. This psychological game reveals more than physical clues ever could." He rose, voice firm. "Tonight, rest assured that I watch not only your actions but your hearts. The murderer's confidence will waver at the slightest pressure." He turned to Lady Evesham and offered a gentle nod. "Madam, you may withdraw. We shall continue. In the morning." One by one, the suspects filed out. subdued by Poirot's unassuming yet incisive probes. Only Mrs. Brackenridge lingered, inclining her head in silent acquiescence before disappearing. Poirot remained alone in the softly lit room. He exhaled slowly, the echo of unspoken confessions lingering in the air. "The game advances," he murmured, "and soon the true culprit will crack like a brittle stem under winter's frost." Outside, the roses awaited midnight's chorus, while within, the intricate dance of mind games continued, leading Poirot ever closer to unveiling the hidden murderer. Chapter 8. A secondary mystery. The next morning dawned grey and overcast, as though the heavens themselves mourned beneath low-hanging clouds. Over breakfast in the dining room, Lady Evesham sat in thoughtful silence, her teacup untouched. Captain Bancroft poured himself a measure of brandy, hoping the warmth would stir his nerves. Hercule Poirot, seated at the head of the table, surveyed the company. Lady Montfort opposite him, Sir Lionel to his right, Dr. Sinclair to his left, Mr. Kemp beside Lady Montfort, and Mrs. Brackenridge standing just off to the side in solemn attendance. "Amiss," Poirot began, "before we resume our inquiries, an unfortunate development has come to light." He raised a hand, and Mrs. Hawkins entered bearing a silver tray with a porcelain teapot. The teapot's lid sat askew, and the spout bore a faint smear of Captain Bancroft sniffed the air as Mrs. Hawkins set the tray down. "There's a sharp almond scent," he said, eyes narrowing. Poirot inclined his head. "Almond, amiss ones. More the whisper of cyanide." He tapped the table. "Last night's psychological game revealed much. But now we face a fresh crime, an attempt on Captain Bancroft's life." A cry rose from Lady Montfort. "Good heavens! But why him? Your question is our first clue," Poirot replied. He motioned for Bancroft to hold the brandy glass. "Captain, did you taste it?" Bancroft set down the glass with trembling fingers. I raised it to my lips, then paused at the smell. He grimaced. "I thought it odd, so I did not drink." Poirot nodded. "Fortunate. We must assume the culprit intended to finish what was begun at midnight." He turned to Mrs. Hawkins. "Did anyone else serve the captain's brandy?" The housekeeper hesitated. "I prepared the tray, but Sir Lionel asked for brandy as he retired to the library last night." Sir Lionel stiffened. "I merely requested it to steady my nerves." "And Captain Bancroft drank none," Poirot said. "Yet the teapot bears evidence of tampering. This smear upon the spout and the misaligned lid." He lifted the lid and peered inside. "No trace remains of tea leaves," Mrs. Hawkins gasped. "I filled the pot with Lady Evesham's Earl Grey. As usual, Earl Grey." "Yes," Poirot affirmed. "But someone substituted it either before or after your service." He turned to Dr. Sinclair. "Doctor, you remained in attendance last night. Did you see anyone handle the teapot?" Dr. Sinclair shook her head. "No, only Lady Montfort fetched cream." Lady Montfort's eyes widened. "I did so upon Captain Bancroft's return from the garden at 11:45 just before the psychological session." Poirot's moustaches quivered. "That places you near the teapot shortly before the dram was prepared, but the brandy came from the decanter." He tapped his finger on the table. "Our culprit intended to kill two birds with one stone. Remove the captain as an obstacle and renew suspicion upon those previously exonerated." Mr. Kemp leaned forward. "But who would target Captain Bancroft?" Poirot's gaze drifted to Mrs. Brackenridge. "Someone who fears the captain's loyalty to Lady Evesham or some secret he guards." He turned to Bancroft. "Did you learn anything last night that might make you a target?" Bancroft pondered. "I spoke privately with Sir Lionel about the missing will. I believed he confided in me, for I sought only to assist Lady Evesham. But our conversation was brief. H&M. Poirot frowned. He stood and moved to the window, peering into the rose garden. And yet our secondary mystery is not merely an attempted murder. Someone has stolen the will from Mr. Kemp's briefcase. He indicated Mr. Kemp's satchel. Now locked and strapped, the will you claimed to retrieve for amendments is no longer there. Kemp's face blanched. It was here when I locked the bag. If you did so, Poirot said quietly. Yet someone clearly rifled the satchel before breakfast. He gestured to Mrs. Hawkins. Show us the study. In the study. Poirot and Bancroft inspected a small mahogany side table where Mr. Kemp had set his briefcase. Last night, the faint outline of a footprint narrow and unshod marred the polished surface. Tiny rose petals nestled in the grain. Poirot knelt to examine them. These are not from the dog rose bush, he murmured, plucking one. They are from Lady Mountford's conservatory orchids transferred on a slipper or hem. He sniffed. And here, he pointed to a faint smudge of violet powder on the footprint's heel. Violet powder. Cosmetic, likely from a woman's glove or dress. Lady Mountford pressed her lips together. I did not enter the study last night. Yet your orchids were here, Poirot said. Mysteries abound. He rose and faced the group gathered. In the drawing room once more, Lady Mountford, Sir Lionel, Dr. Sinclair, Mr. Kemp, Mrs. Brackenridge, and Captain Bancroft. Listen carefully, Poirot said. Our murderer, fearing discovery, attempted a second crime. Remove Captain Bancroft and steal the will evidence of motive. The footprint and petals indicate a woman as culprit. A woman with violet cosmetics and conservatory orchids. He paused. Mrs. Brackenridge, you move silently and know the house well. Lady Mountford, your gloves once bore orchid pollen. Mrs. Brackenridge's role as governess gave her access at all hours. Lady Mountford's presence at the conservatory, well documented. Lady Mountford's voice trembled. Monsieur Poirot, I swear I did not enter the study after leaving the drawing room. Yet the evidence suggests otherwise, Poirot said. He turned to Mrs. Brackenridge. Madame, you were the last to serve tea. The governess lifted her chin. I prepared the tray here, in the pantry, and seen by others. Then someone intercepted the teapot between pantry and dining room. Poirot said, a short corridor, easily passed by one familiar with its shadows. He looked back at Lady Mountford. And you walk that corridor at 11:45 to fetch cream. Lady Mountford's composure cracked. She sank into a chair, head in hands. I see now. You believe me guilty again. Poirot stepped forward. Madam, I believe only what the facts dictate. Your gloves bear orchid pollen, not rose. You did not brush the bush, but you alone knew the corridor and its shadows. He turned then to Mrs. Brackenridge, and you, who lingered near that corridor last night, had equal opportunity to tamper with both teapot and SATCHEL. Double quotes Mrs. Brackenridge's eyes widened. Monsieur, but I would not. Poirot raised a finger. Allow me to demonstrate. He retrieved his notebook and sketched the corridor's layout. Two doors lead into this passage, the pantry and the study. One window halfway down overlooks the garden. A shadow moves unseen here. He tapped the sketch. Only one person visits both the pantry for a tea and the study for documents. Madame Brackenridge, you had reasons to visit both. The governess rose. Face session. I only wished to protect Madame Eversham's reputation. I did not intend harm to Captain Bancroft or to steal the will. Poirot's eyes met hers. Intent is a subtle art, but action speaks more loudly. You brushed orchid petals in the corridor, wore violet cosmetics that left powder on the floor, and handled the teapot en route. Mrs. Brackenridge's shoulders slumped, tears in her eyes. I took the will. I thought to burn it, destroy. The confession that condemned Sir Lionel, and I feared Bancroft would thwart me. I meant only to protect Lady Eversham and our family name. A gasp rippled through the room. Lady Mountford rose. Eyes wet. Celia. Poirot nodded gravely. The secondary mystery reveals the heart of fear of scandal, fear of loss. Yet the true crime lies elsewhere. He turned to the assembled. We have caught our perpetrator of last night's second act, but the murderer who struck at midnight remains at large, as Mrs. Brackenridge was gently escorted away. Her confession echoing in the stillness, Poirot addressed the remaining 5. Let us press on with our inquiries. The roses will speak once more, and the final culprit's mask shall fall. Outside, the dog rose bush swayed in the wind, its petals drifting like whispered secrets across the garden path. Within the grand walls of Primrose Lane, the secondary mystery had unfolded, yet the master kernel of truth still lay hidden beneath layers of deception. Chapter 9. Hidden Connections. Late that afternoon, the drawing room at number 17 Primrose Lane took on a hushed expectancy. The revelation of Mrs. Brackenridge's desperate act had shaken the household. Yet Hercule Poirot knew the heart of the mystery still lay buried deeper. He stood before the remaining company: Lady Montfort, Sir Lionel Carrington, Dr. Beatrice Sinclair, Mr. Harold Kemp, Captain Bancroft, and Lady Rosalind Eversham, each seated with measured composure, though eyes betrayed faint tremors of unease. Amos, Poirot began, voice calm and deliberate. We have dispelled false leads and unveiled secondary crimes. Now, we address the hidden connections that bind you and reveal the true motive behind Sir Reginald's death. He pressed a button on the bell. Mrs. Hawkins entered, carrying a small lacquer box. Poirot opened it to reveal a collection of personal items, an embroidered handkerchief, a faded photograph, a torn theatre program, and a slender leather notebook. He placed them on the table. These items belonged to Sir Reginald. Poirot explained. Discovered hidden in the safe, alongside the confession letters. He motioned to the photograph. This shows Sir Reginald with Lady Montfort at a country fete 5 years prior, looking far more than cordial. He looked at Lady Montfort. You insisted you and he were merely friends. Yet here you are, arm in arm with him. Lady Montfort's breath caught. We were cousins by marriage, Monsieur Poirot. I stood by him in a time of public shame. She drew her gloves closer. Public shame. Poirot repeated, a scandal involving forged securities, Sir Lionel's fear. He turned to Sir Lionel. You were involved in that affair, and Reginald paid the price of your misdeeds. Sir Lionel's eyes flickered at the mention. Sir Lionel cleared his throat. That was settled years ago. I compensated Reginald for any loss. Yet resentment lingers, Poirot noted. He lifted the torn theatre program. This program is from a charity performance in which Dr. Sinclair volunteered alongside Lady Montfort. He held it open. Notice the cast list. Lady Montfort's name appears far down, though she claimed a leading part. Lady Montfort flushed. I was indisposed that evening. My voice failed. Dr. Sinclair leaned forward. I helped her backstage. She was nervous yet insisted on performing to honor Sir Reginald's hospital committee. Poirot's mustaches twitched. You and Lady Montfort share more than a stage. You both vie for Reginald's approval. He placed the program aside and reached for the leather notebook. This belongs to Mr. Kemp, his shorthand notes from Sir Reginald's meetings. He flipped it open to reveal entries concerning financial advisements to Sir Lionel. Mr. Kemp, you advised Sir Lionel on investments tied to Reginald's estate. You and his trust. Mr. Kemp swallowed. I served him faithfully, but also profited, Poirot added. Yet Sir Reginald discovered discrepancies in those accounts, leading to suspicion. He looked at Kemp sharply. You feared both public scandal and loss of income. He paused, letting the weight of that connection settle. Then he turned to Captain Bancroft. Captain, your bond with Lady Eversham predates your service here. You met her at the Red Cross Ball in 1918. You two share a history of wartime friendship. Captain Bancroft inclined his head. She saved my life in Salonika. I owe her everything. You are her loyalty, Poirot said, and perhaps more love unspoken. He observed Bancroft's blush. Bancroft looked away. My duty is to protect her interests. Poirot nodded. Forgive me, Captain, yet your devotion makes you both potential guardian and adversary in this affair. He laid out the embroidered handkerchief. This belonged to Lady Evesham embroidered, with the initials, or yet it bears a faint monogram beneath. Ellen, he held it close. Lady Montfort, you confessed to borrowing her linens in times of distress. But why mark a handkerchief with your own initials, Lady Montfort's? Voice trembled. It was an accident. I used it and intended to return it, but forgot. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Yet Sir Reginald discovered it, confronting you about misused trust just days ago. Lady Evesham gasped. Reginald never spoke of that. To me, only I know of it. Poirot smiled faintly, for I found a letter and sent among his papers a reprimand to Lady Montfort for betraying his confidence. He turned to Lady Evesham. Madam, you may not have known, but your cousin's misplaced initials cost her his goodwill. Lady Montfort's shoulders slumped. Poirot paused, gathering his thoughts. He surveyed the room. These hidden connections romantic, financial, collegial form a web of interdependency. Each of you benefited from Sir Reginald in some way, and each harbored hidden resentments. He placed his fingertip on the table near the photograph. But one connection transcends the rest, between Sir Lionel and Dr. Sinclair. He looked. From Carrington to Sinclair, the clandestine liaison, begun the year of the forged securities scandal. Dr. Sinclair provided medical testimony to shield Sir Lionel's reputation. Dr. Sinclair's face went pale. Sir Lionel's eyes widened. Monsieur, Dr. Sinclair protested. That was professional duty, not a relationship. Poirot inclined his head. True enough, but motive need not be romantic. You both shared the same secret. Sir Reginald, in his journal, intended to expose that alliance an ethical breach for a physician and a man of position. He tapped the leather notebook. That is why Reginald kept these items locked away, to protect both of you and himself. Sir Lionel's jaw clenched. He meant only to warn me, not to publish. Intent matters little, Poirot said. The threat alone spurred desperate measures. He leaned forward, yet Reginald's death required precision and opportunity. Our culprit needed knowledge of the safe, access to the study at midnight, and the psychological finesse to manipulate suspicion. He stood and paced slowly. Mrs. Brackenridge attempted to protect Lady Evesham, yet lacked the knowledge of the poem. Lady Montfort and Mr. Kemp had motives, but their fingerprints literally and figuratively do not align with the poison's administration. He paused before Sir Lionel. Dr. Sinclair, you possess medical knowledge and access to poison. You know the study's layout from checking on patients. You borrowed that poem in a moment of curiosity enough to use it as misdirection. And you and Sir Lionel share a motive. Conceal your secret. Dr. Sinclair's lips trembled. No. Poirot turned to Sir Lionel, and you, Sir Lionel, stood to lose not only reputation, but also your fortune, should Reginald publish those memoirs. He looked at both. When Reginald refused your entreaties to destroy the confession letters, you realized only one way remained. Remove him yourself. Sir Lionel rose to his feet. You accuse us both. Poirot's eyes glittered. I accuse the one who had the skills, the nerve, and the hidden motive. Dr. Sinclair, you volunteered for a midnight rounds under the guise of care, yet administered cyanide as easily as a physician draws blood. You then planted evidence to implicate Lady Evesham, Lady Montfort, even Rena Brackenridge. He fixed his gaze. It was you who wrote at midnight, "The roses speak" in Lady Evesham's own verse to divert suspicion. Dr. Sinclair's shoulders sagged. I loved him once, she whispered. He promised to keep silence, but then threatened publication. Sir Lionel's face turned ashen. Beatrice. Poirot raised a hand. And you, Sir Lionel, though complicit in motives, did not choose murder. You arrived too late to stop her. His gaze returned to Sinclair. Madam, you are our culprit. A heavy silence fell. Then Poirot smiled gently. The hidden connections have revealed the true bond of medicine that Hild also killed. He produced the tiny vial retrieved from her bag. Cyanide. Just a drop. The roses spoke in whispers of truth, but you drowned them in deceit. Dr. Sinclair bowed her head. It was not premeditated, only desperation. Lady Eversham rose. Tears in her eyes. Beatrice, why? Dr. Sinclair's voice cracked. I believed I saved more reputations than I destroyed. Sir Lionel placed a hand on her shoulder. A doctor must do no harm even in the name of love. Poirot inclined his head, and thus justice is served by exposing the hidden connections. He turned to Lady Eversham. Madam, the truth may wound, but it frees the heart. Outside, the dog roses trembled softly in the breeze, within the grand walls of Primrose Lane. The final threads of conspiracy lay exposed, each secret connection, laid bare by Poirot's unerring logic and unyielding compassion. Chapter 10. Poirot's secret collate that afternoon. Hercule Poirot returned to the quiet of Sir Reginald's study alone, determined to examine one small detail that had eluded him until now. The afternoon sun filtered through high mullioned windows, illuminating the rich dust motes dancing above. The worn carpet, the room, cleared of suspects and servants, felt as though it had resumed the hush of normality, yet to Poirot it still pulsed with unanswered questions. He approached the polished writing desk and gently lifted the blotter. Though washed and relaid, its corner bore a faint impression, a pattern of tiny notches along the edge, invisible to any at the most precise of eyes. Poirot's gloved fingertip traced the grooves. Curio, he murmured, a bespoke blotter, custom-made, yes, but these notches, they correspond to the teeth of a key. Of what key? He crouched and examined the underside of the desk, noting a barely perceptible line where a hidden compartment had been seamlessly cut, pressing along that seam. The desk frame gave way with a soft click, revealing a narrow wooden box embedded in the structure of the furniture itself. Inside lay several small objects, a green velvet cushion on which rested a silver locket, a slender envelope sealed with crimson wax, and strangest of all, a single dried rose petal, blackened at the edges. Poirot's eyes gleamed. He gently scooped up the petal and held it to the light. The blackened dog rose petal burned ever so slightly. He said, "But why preserve it here?" He opened the envelope and withdrew a slip of paper bearing a cipher, a series of dots and dashes ranged in a circle. Beneath it, in Sir Reginald's neat hand, was written 3 words, Rosier Noyle Code. At once, Poirot recognized the puzzle. Rosier Noyle Code. The black rose cipher. He tapped his mustache thoughtfully. Sir Reginald, ever fond of cryptography as a hobby, left me this final clue. But which of the suspects knows of this cipher? He set the envelope aside and opened the locket. Within was a miniature portrait of Sir Reginald and a woman. Poirot did not immediately recognize her features, strikingly similar to those of Lady Montfort. Indeed, the inscription on the back read, "From my dearest Lucienne, 1908, Lady." Montfort's given name, then, was Lucienne Montfort. Poirot leaned back, reflecting. The cipher, the locket, the blackened petal, they speak of a secret between Reginald and Lucienne. A love concealed and then betrayed. He examined the velvet cushion, noting indentations where the locket had rested. But the cipher, it must unlock his last message. He bent over the desk to retrieve a small magnifying glass and returned to the cipher sheet. With meticulous care, He transcribed the pattern into dots and dashes on a nearby notepad. Each cluster corresponded to a letter in the French variant of Morse code. His finger traced the circle, and so on. Slowly, the letters emerged. Chambre Noire derrière la librairie. Black room behind the library. Yes, Poirot whispered. The Chambre Noire, the dark room. An undeclared room in the east wing used by Sir Reginald for his private studies. He rose and headed toward the library door. His mind racing, passing through the library. He examined the high bookcases, where one shelf stood solid, another bore an incongruous gap at shoulder height. Poirot pressed a hidden catch concealed on the spine of a volume, and the bookcase swung inward, revealing a narrow passage lit by a single, dim bulb. The air inside smelled faintly of almonds, and lavender dot at the end of the passage lay a small chamber, walls lined with filing cabinets and covered with Sir Reginald's notes. A single desk lamp illuminated a heavy oak table. On it rested a bound manuscript titled Memoirs and Confessions, alongside a vial of cyanide and a half-empty notebook of Dr. Sinclair's handwriting. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Here lay the motive. Reginald had compiled his memoirs to expose not only the old scandal, but also this secret love affair with Lucian Montfort and, shockingly, the clandestine relationship with Dr. Sinclair that threatened both their reputations. Yet why the cyanide vial? It suggested that Reginald, in this private black room, had contemplated suicide upon revealing all until he was murdered first as he rifled through the cabinet drawers. Poirot found correspondences addressed to Sir Lionel Carrington, begging him to help protect Beatrice Sinclair's reputation. Another note, written in Reginald's hand. Entreated my dear Lucian to meet him at midnight in the rose garden that same fatal midnight. The dried petal from the blotter had come from a black blooming hybrid rose Reginald cultivated just for her. Poirot tucked the locket into his waistcoat pocket. The roses speak indeed not merely by words on a blotter, but through petals, through midnight meetings. He closed the cabinet and stood in the hush of the dark room. Sir Reginald's final clue points to this secret rendezvous midnight, in the rose garden, where only Lucian Montfort and Beatrice Sinclair knew to meet him. He retraced his steps through the passage and emerged into the library, where Captain Bancroft awaited. Summoned by Poirot's discreet note, "Mon ami," Poirot said quietly, "we have found the Chambre Noire and Sir Reginald's secret instructions." He handed Bancroft the locket. "Show this to Lady Montfort as proof that Reginald intended to reveal their affair and, at the same time, expose Dr. Sinclair's duplicity." Bancroft nodded, understanding fully. At midnight, he said, their meeting will take place. Once more, this time with justice as witness. Poirot smiled, a glint in his eyes. "We shall gather them in the rose garden at midnight, when the roses speak. There, the secret clue will unmask the killer in plain sight." He patted Bancroft's shoulder. "Ah, mon frère, the little grey cells have spoken at last." Outside, the dog rose bush stirred in the dying light, its petals trembling as though anticipating Poirot's final summons. Within the silent grandeur of Primrose Lane, the hidden chamber's secrets had been revealed, and the last act of Poirot's methodical play was set to begin. Chapter 11. Tensions rise. Night had fallen once. Moreover, number 17 Primrose Lane, and a restless tension permeated the corridors. Word of Poirot's plan to confront the suspects in the rose garden at midnight had spread like a hush among the house. Hold, servants moved more quietly, footsteps softened, and Lady Eversham paced her sitting room, wringing her hands. Within the drawing-room, Captain Bancroft lit candles along the Montelbys, their flickering flames reflecting the anguish in his eyes. Poirot stood by the tall window overlooking the garden, his silhouette composed and poised. In his hands he held the silver locket, its miniature portrait of Sir Reginald and Lucian Montfort catching each candle's glow round him. The remaining suspects gathered, Lady Montfort in a simple dark gown, trembling yet resolute. Sir Lionel Carrington, cobalt overcoat draped over his arm, face lined with dread. Dr. Sinclair, hands clasped tightly before her, pupils dilated. Mr. Kemp punched slightly, spectacles reflecting candlelight. Msamus, Poirot began, voice low and steady. Soon the roses will speak the truth, but before that hour, tensions must be allowed to rise to bring hidden fears to the surface. He placed the locket on a small side table. Use this time to speak among yourselves. Let Tempus Frailet alliances show their true colors. I shall observe. With that, Poirot retreated discreetly into the library, leaving the suspects to their uneasy parleys. The room grew thick with suppressed emotion. Lady Montfort approached Sir Lionel with measured steps. "Lionel," she whispered, voice quavering, "tell me it was not you who urged Beatrice to silence him." Sir Lionel's jaw tightened. "I never asked her to kill Reginald. I only feared exposure." He dropped his gaze. She acted on, her own driven by loyalty to us both. Dr. Sinclair, overhearing the exchange, stepped forward. "Lucian," she said, tone brittle, "you used Reginald's love for you as leverage, believing he would grant anything for the sake of that affection." Lady Montfort's eyes flashed. "And you, Beatrice, used your duty to him as excuse for intrusion. Your medical care hid darker intentions. Double quotes. Dr. Sinclair's lips drew into a thin line. "I did what I thought necessary to protect you, to protect all of us." Mr. Kemp interjected from his corner. "Protection such a fickle justification. I served Reginald faithfully, yet you conspired behind his back. None of you deserve pity." Sir Lionel turned on him. "You know little of our matters, solicitor. Your own grasp on Reginald's finances was precarious. He discovered your overcharges." Mr. Kemp recoiled as if struck. "That was a misunderstanding. Reginald was too hasty." Lady Evesham entered, her voice quivering. "Enough. You all speak of protecting me, but you lie to save yourselves." She clutched her heart. "Tell me, who among you loved him enough to betray every trust?" Suddenly, Dr. Sinclair's hand clenched the back of a chair. "Rosalind, I cared for him deeply, but you were his wife. I would never have harmed him if not compelled by fear that he would ruin us both." Lady Montfort's eyes welled. "And I thought his love would last, but you knew, Beatrice, that all he wanted was to confess to me in that garden. At midnight, you feared that confession more than you feared the law." Silence fell. Sir Lionel's face grew ashen. "Enough," he said hoarsely. "This quarrel will achieve nothing before midnight." Poirot emerged from the library, leaning casually against the doorframe. His eyes, though calm, glittered with anticipation. "Indeed, Monsieur Carrington, let tempers cool until our appointed hour. I ask you all now to make your way to the rose garden at exactly midnight. There we shall see which roses speak and which remain silent." He bowed slightly and withdrew. Leaving the group to collect themselves, Lady Evesham sank onto a sofa, burying her face in her hands. Captain Bancroft moved to her side, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Moments later, the 6 suspects departed through the corridor, each consumed by their own tumultuous thoughts. Outside, the lamps in the garden walkway shone like sentinels guiding them toward the rose bushes. Poirot, having returned to the study, reviewed his notes by lamplight, the locket, the cipher, the hidden chamber's contents. He penned a few final observations, then rose and donned his overcoat. At 11:55, he stepped into the damp night. The garden was hushed under a thin veil of mist. Silver lanterns marked the path, their light trembling among the dew-laden blooms. At the center stood the dog rose bush, petals glistening as though poised to whisper secrets on the breeze. One by one, the suspects arrived. Lady Montfort, pale, yet dignified, Sir Lionel, stooped with tension. Dr. Sinclair, white-knuckled. Mr. Kemp, restless. Captain Bancroft offering silent support to Lady Eversham. Poirot greeted them with a nod. "Thank you for coming. The roses speak tonight. Listen closely and you will hear the truth." He motioned toward the bush. "Let us proceed." As the hands of a distant clock crept toward midnight, hearts pounded in the hush. Each suspect's silent breath mingled with the night errant among the blossoms. A final revelation waited to bloom. Chapter 12. The Confrontation's Midnighter. Cold, cool, and fragrant round number 17 Primrose Lane's rose garden. Under the ghostly glow of lanterns, the dewy blossoms seemed to hold their breath. Hercule Poirot stood before the dog-rose bush with an intensity that belied his serene posture. The assembled five, Lady Montfort, Sir Lionel Carrington, Dr. Sinclair, Mr. Kemp, and Captain Bancroft with Lady Eversham by his side, formed a semicircle, each face strong with anticipation and anxiety. Poirot's small, bright eyes scanned the group. "Msamas, you have listened to the roses speak twice now in petals, in verse, and in hidden chambers. You have heard the first false lead and the secondary deception. Tonight, at last, we confront the truth." He lifted the silver locket, its miniature portrait glinting. Sir Reginald's final gift was this token, and his cipher led us to the chamber Noir. There we found his manuscript and Dr. Sinclair's abandoned notebook, a damning testament to knowledge you should not have possessed. Doctor. All eyes turned to Dr. Sinclair. Her lips parted. But she said nothing. Poirot continued, voice even. "Yet before accusing any one person, I wish to observe one final reaction. Each of you has handled evidence you believed hidden. Lady Montfort, the locket. Sir Lionel, the confession letters. Mr. Kemp, the missing will. Captain Bancroft, the cipher notes. Lady Eversham, her private rhyme. Now I ask each of you to touch this rose." He pointed to a single blossom perched at eye level. "Feel its petals." One by one they approached the bush. Lady Montfort's fingers brushed the soft blush of petals and recoiled at the prick of a hidden thorn. Sir Lionel's palm paused on a leaf, lingering as though recalling a memory. Mr. Kemp closed his eyes as his fingertips traced the stem. Captain Bancroft guided Lady Eversham's hand gently to the same bloom, offering reassurance. Finally, Dr. Sinclair stepped forward, pausing to close her eyes before placing her hand on the rose. Poirot inclined his head. "Thank you. Observe the thorns as you fell on them, small wounds, easily overlooked. Yet some of you bear more than physical thorns." He turned to the group. "Now, I shall recite Sir Reginald's last notation, found in the chamber Noir." Poirot unfolded a scrap of paper and read aloud in his measured cadence. "The heart may speak in every shelter, but only the guilty bleed unseen." He refolded the note, a riddle indicating the murderer's soul pierced by guilt. "Yet one among you carries more than a figurative wound." Poirot placed the locket on a low pedestal beside the rose. "Let us speak frankly. Lady Montfort, your affair with Sir Reginald inspired passion and betrayal. You possessed the locket, and you alone knew its secret meeting at this rosebush." He fixed his gaze. "Why did you not arrive at midnight?" Lady Montfort's voice trembled. "I changed my mind. I feared what he might reveal, and yet your initials upon Lady Eversham's handkerchief revealed you had entered the bureau days earlier." Poirot said. "You touched that handkerchief, then replaced it, hoping no one would notice." She drew in a shuddering breath. "I confess that. But I did not kill him." Poirot inclined his head, acknowledged. "Sir Lionel, you feared exposure of your financial crimes and your liaison with Dr. Sinclair. You arrived unannounced last night, brandy in hand, to plead for silence. Yet you know nothing of the Black Rose cipher until now." Sir Lionel flushed. "I learned only from you, Monsieur Poirot." "Strange," Poirot murmured. for you were seen near the study door at 11:59. He produced the torn ledger entry. Your penmanship unmistakably matches this annotation in Reginald's journal. Lionel arrives at Butch, written in the bedroom adjoining this garden. So Lionel staggered. I accompanied Lady Montfort there, once before midnight. Poirot's moustaches twitched. Indeed. But this note was penned after his murder. You could not have known its contents unless you witnessed it being written. Sir Lionel stammered. I did not see him write it. Poirot turned to Mr. Kemp, solicitor. You stood to gain from Sir Reginald's demise. You would inherit through errors in his will. You stole that will last night. He held up the document. You hacked open Mr. Bancroft's satchel to seize it. Mr. Kemp's face paled. Only to protect Lady Eversham's interests. I intended to return it, and yet you delivered it to your chambers. Mr. Kemp's shoulders sagged. Yes, but I did not kill him. Poirot's gaze settled on Dr. Sinclair. Doctor, you possessed the most skill to administer cyanide without detection. You followed Sir Reginald here, to this very rose, expecting a secret tryst. You knew of his ambivalent desire for suicide, hence the cyanide found in the Chamanoir. But you could not bear to let him expose both yourself and Sir Lionel. He paused, voice gentle, and so, at the stroke of midnight, you administered the poison. Double quotes. Dr. Sinclair's eyes flashed. No, I only meant to frighten him into silence. Poirot stepped closer, but the dose was fatal. You watched him collapse, leaving you time to wash your gloves in the fountain and stave the crime scene. He indicated the distant fountain. I know because I saw the footprints bear soles, reaching here from the Chamanoir. You removed your gloves there, then donned the lavender pair to smear the blotter. Dr. Sinclair's composure cracked. She clasped the thorny bloom, pressing its stem until her fingers bled. I thought him lost to despair. I thought to prevent greater suffering. Alas, Poirot said softly, despair led to tragedy. Yet one mistake remains, the blackened petal hidden in the secret box. Only you knew it was a hybrid burnt by candle because you visited the Chamanoir more than once. You touched that petal in your panic and brought it here. He pointed to her hand, where the thorns bled onto her glove. Dr. Sinclair's shoulders trembled. He wanted to confess he wrote of it. He asked me to help him live. I snapped. She dropped to her knees, tears streaming. Forgive me, Reginald. I did not mean this. Poirot bowed his head. Adieu, madam. He turned back to the group. The murderer is unmasked. Yet she stands as both physician and executioner, driven by fear and love. A distant clock began to chime. The first stroke of midnight resonated through the garden. The roses stirred. By the hour, released their fragrance into the night air. As though acknowledging the final act, Poirot raised his hand for a silence. Let the roses speak no more. Our work here is done. Tomorrow, the law will take its course. Tonight, we honor Sir Reginald's memory by bringing truth to light. As the last chime faded, the 5 remaining figures stood in solemn witness. In the hush that followed, the garden's lanterns flickered, and Poirot's little grey cells rested at last, having orchestrated justice at the stroke of midnight. Chapter 13. A desperate attempt to escape. The chill of early dawn seeped through the corridors of number 17 Primrose Lane, as if the house itself recoiled from the night's grim revelations. In the drawing-room, Captain Bancroft and Lady Eversham stood together, gathering strength after the confrontation that had laid bare Dr. Sinclair's guilt. Mr. Kemp paced near the fireplace, while Lady Montfort and Sir Lionel exchanged solemn glances. Poirot, seated in an armchair, polished his monocle, eyes closed in thoughtful repose. Without warning, a distant crash echoed from the upper hall and about. Metallic clang that shattered the fragile calm. Captain Bancroft drew his service revolver. Heart pounding. Monsieur Poirot. That sounded like the study. He exclaimed. Poirot opened his eyes. Alert, indeed. It would seem Madame Sinclair has not resigned herself to surrender so easily. He rose, smoothing his waistcoat. Come, let us see to this. They hurried toward the grand staircase, at its base. They paused as the final stroke of the grandfather. Clock tolled 6. From above came hurried footsteps, soft yet urgent. Accompanied by the slam of a door, the group converged at the top of the stairs. Poirot held up a finger. Silence. He whispered. Slowly, they ascended. At the study door formally. The scene of such careful examination, they found the lock shattered. It splintered, wood-strewn across the threshold. Faint footprints in scattered rose petals led into the room. Here, Poirot murmured, pointing to a crimson smudge on the floorboards, fresh, not the dried remnants of last night's blooms. She passed this way. Within the study, the desk lay overturned, drawers yanked open, contents strewn, papers fluttered across the carpet. The safe's door lay ajar, its letters scattered. The black rose cipher sheet lay half-burned in the fireplace, its charred edges curling inward. Only the locket remained undisturbed, glinting atop a corner of the blotter. Dr. Sinclair. Captain Bancroft called, stepping over spill ink. Bottles, show yourself. No answer came, only the whispered hiss of a dying fire. Lady Eversham rushed to the window. She cannot have fled outside, there is no sign in the garden. Sir Lionel knelt by the fireplace, fishing out the charred cipher. She tried to destroy the evidence. Poirot examined the embers, courageous, but hardly thorough. He gestured toward the doorway leading into the corridor beyond. She fled that way. They spilled into the hallway. Eye scanning. The corridor's Persian runner bore footprints, bare soles, pressed to deeply at the heel. Tiny flecks of violet powder dotted the carpet, and a solitary orchid petal lay crushed beneath a foot. Lady Montfort gasped. Beatrice must have passed through my conservatory, she cried. I saw these petals there last night. Poirot nodded. She knows this house intimately. She will head for the Chamber Noir, the only place left to destroy Sir Reginald's original manuscript. Captain Bancroft drew a torch from his pocket and led the group. They reached the library, where Poirot pressed the hidden catch in the bookcase as it swung open. Bancroft swept the torch's beam into the secret passage, dark and narrow, yet unmistakably familiar. After her, Poirot commanded, voice hushed but firm. One by one, they entered. The passage was damp, the air tinged with lavender and the acrid sting of burnt paper. Bancroft's torch flicked along the walls until they arrived at the chamber door. Poirot gently pushed it open. Inside, the black room was a scene of panic. Cabinets had been forced open, peepers torn. A small brass chimney stood crooked, its charcoal embers still glowing. On the table sat the bound manuscript, its spine scorched, and beside it an empty vial, the cyanide container, its stopper. Missing! Poirot's eyes narrowed. She intended to burn every trace. A sudden noise behind them, a soft scraping, alerted them. Captain Bancroft trained his torch on the far wall, where a concealed trapdoor lay ajar. Violet powder dusted the latch. Quickly, Poirot urged. Beneath there, Bancroft hopped down into the shallow pit beyond the hatch, torch in hand. He found himself in a small service corridor leading back toward the rear courtyard. Through a high window, moonlight glimmered on wet cobblestones. Bancroft glimpsed a flash of dark fabric moving outside. She's escaping, he muttered. Poirot and the others followed through the trapdoor. Emerging into the damp courtyard, Dr. Sinclair stood at the far end, silhouette framed by the wrought iron gate that led to the lane. Her coat flared as she stepped toward freedom, eyes wild. You shall not pass, Bancroft called. Leveling his torch, Dr. Sinclair raised a trembling hand. I cannot let them read it. I had to stop them all. Poirot stepped forward into the moonlight. Madam, your flight will only confirm your guilt. Surrender peacefully and ensure no further harm comes, she stared, indecision warping her features. Then, with a guttural cry, she turned and bolted. Toward the gate, Bancroft sprinted after her, while Sir Lionel and Mr. Kemp blocked the path. Lady Montfort and Lady Evesham huddled near the gate's hinge, hands clasped, dodging past Sir Lionel. Dr. Sinclair lunged at the manuscript, still clutched in Bancroft's waiting hand. He had retrieved it. Earlier, the bound pages spilled, and she fell to her knees, scrambling among the scattered sheets. "Give it to me," she sobbed. "You don't understand without it. I lose everything." Captain Bancroft knelt beside her, gently prying the pages from her grasp. "Beatrice, think of Rosalind. Think of Reginald's memory. This is not the way." Her shoulders shook. "I thought I loved him. I thought I was saving us," Poirot, having reached the gate, flicked on a lantern. "Stand down. Madam, they'll arrive soon." Dr. Sinclair looked up at him, tears streaming. She extended a hand, releasing the manuscript. "Take it," she whispered. I give myself in." At that moment, distant hooves clattered, a pair of mounted police rounding the corner. Lanterns bobbing, the officers dismounted rapidly. Handcuffs at the ready. Captain Bancroft stood and stepped back. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot watched as Dr. Sinclair rose, trembling, and allowed herself to be gently led away by the constables. The manuscript, now safely in Bancroft's hand, remained intact, its secrets preserved. Outside, the first blush of dawn tinged the sky. The roses in the courtyard's adjacent flower beds seemed to shiver in the morning breeze, petals glistening like tears. Within number 17 Primrose Lane's grounds, justice had nearly slipped away, but Poirot's unerring logic and swift action ensured the murderer's final attempt at escape had been thwarted. As the mounted police rode off toward the main gate, Captain Bancroft turned to Poirot. "Monsieur, without your guidance, she might have vanished into the mist." Poirot smiled serenely. "All is as it should be. Captain, the little grey cells prevail even against the direst of flights." Lady Evesham approached, relief and sorrow in her eyes. She placed a gentle hand on Poirot's arm. "Thank you for saving not only me, but the truth." Poirot inclined his head. "Madam, it is I who thank you for cooperating, even when the stakes were highest." He glanced at the bound manuscript tucked under his arm. "Now, we must see that Sir Reginald's memoirs find their rightful place, lest another attempt at silence." Ever eyes, at his words, the roses in the courtyard seemed to sigh with closure, petals drifting on the breeze as dawn's light broke through the clouds, heralding an end to the desperate attempt to escape. And the promise of justice restored. Chapter 14. The final piece falls into Placide courtyard's pale dawnlight bathed the rose bushes in a gentle glow, as though nature herself sought to soothe the night's turmoil. Within the quiet hush, Hercule Poirot surveyed the scene with his customary poise, save for the faint tremor of satisfaction in his moustaches. The bound manuscript of Sir Reginald's memoirs was safely in his arms, and the culprit, Dr. Beatrice Sinclair, had been taken into custody. Yet in Poirot's mind, one last detail required elucidation, the final piece of the puzzle that would render all the disparate threads irrevocably coherent. Captain Bancroft stepped to his side. "Monsieur Poirot, the others await your word in the drawing-room. Shall we reconvene to ensure there are no lingering uncertainties?" "Mais oui, mon ami," Poirot replied, tipping his hat to the assembled roses. "We must offer the household a clear account. That no doubt may fester." They crossed the courtyard back into the grand hallway, where Lady Evesham met them. her expression a mixture of relief and lingering sorrow. Behind her stood Lady Montfort, Sir Lionel Carrington, and Mr. Kemp, still in their formal attire though the late hour had long passed. Their faces were drawn but expectant. All eyes turned to Poirot. "Madam, Messieurs," Poirot began, "before we discuss what has transpired, I wish to present the final piece, the Black Rose cipher's ultimate revelation." He carefully laid Sir Reginald's manuscript on the centre table, opened to the chapter heading Chamanoa. Within these pages lay his true intentions. He planned neither self-destructs nor scandal, but a full confession to clear his conscience and protect those he loved. He pointed to the single dried, blackened rose petal now preserved under a glass stone beside the manuscript. This hybrid rose, cultivated by Sir Reginald, is unique to Primrose Lane. Its petals, once burned by candlelight, provided the cipher's clue. The pattern of notches on the blotter corresponded to the key of the hidden compartment, which held both the locket and the cipher sheet. Lady Montfort exchanged a glance with Sir Lionel. "Monsieur Poirot, forgive my ignorance, how did the notches translate to the cipher?" she asked. Poirot smiled gently. "Observe. Madam, the blotter's edge featured 20 small indentations, each representing a dot or dash in Morse code. Sir Reginald's meticulous hand aligned them with the petal's ridges. Only one versed in cryptography and intimately familiar with this blotter could discern the pattern." He moved to the mantelpiece and produced the blotter, demonstrating how he overlaid the petal's shape against the notches. This alignment spelled out, in French Morse, "Chamber Noire derrière la librairie," the hidden chamber behind the library. From there, I uncovered the manuscript and the cyanide vial, confirming the planned rendezvous and the intended confession. Sir Lionel nodded, comprehension dawning. "So Sir Reginald left this for you to find, to protect his honour." "Exactement," Poirot said. "He foresaw danger, knew that certain secrets, if disclosed, might motivate desperate actions. Hence the cipher, the hidden room, the petal." He turned to Mr. Kemp. "Monsieur Kemp, you discovered the missing will and feared financial chaos. Your haste to retrieve it nearly led to error. But your heart remained loyal to Lady Eversham's interests. There is no stain upon your honour." Beyond a momentary lapse, Mr. Kemp inclined his head. "I am grateful, Monsieur Poirot. I only sought to preserve order." Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Montfort. "Madam, your affection for Sir Reginald was both tender and complicated. The locket he gifted you symbolizes a love that never fully blossomed. You feared the public revelation of your private relationship. But you are not culpable of murder, and your initial misdirection was born of genuine shame, not malice." Tears glistened in Lady Montfort's eyes. "Thank you. I only wished to protect him. Protection can be misplaced," Poirot observed. "But intention matters. You have mine." He then addressed Sir Lionel Carrington. "Monsieur, your financial dealings and liaison with Dr. Sinclair sparked much of the conflict, yet you, too, acted out of fear of ruin. You did not strike the fatal blow. Though your past set the stage. Double quotes Sir Lionel's shoulders sagged. "I only begged Reginald to spare us, and he would have, had Dr. Sinclair not intervened so tragically," Poirot said. He turned to include all. "Thus, the true weapon, the cyanide, came from a vial you, Doctor, possessed by virtue of your medical authority." He bowed his head slightly toward Dr. Sinclair, seated now in a chair near the fireplace, flanked by uniformed officers. Beatrice Sinclair believed she acted in protection of love, of reputation, but she overstepped the bounds of mercy. Dr. Sinclair, cheeks pale, raised her head. "I see that now. I gave in to fear and passion. I am sorry beyond words." Poirot's gaze softened. "Regret, though too late to undo his passing, demonstrates the tragedy of misused love. Yet the law must take its course. You will have the opportunity to make amends, though justice will demand its due." He turned to Lady Evesham, who had remained silent until now. "Madam, your strength through this ordeal honours your husband's memory. Sir Reginald's final words to you are here." Poirot opened the manuscript to a handwritten page. "To my dearest Rosalind, in the end, truth endures beyond any petty fear. Live bravely, love completely, and forgive freely." Lady Evesham pressed a hand to her heart, tears glistening. "His words, they give me courage." Poirot closed the manuscript gently. "May they guide you forward. The final piece has fallen into place: the cipher, the chamber, the confession, and the motives of each. Our task now is to allow the morning light to bring clarity to all." He paused, surveying the company. Sir Reginald crafted this intricate design not to conceal secrets, but to reveal them in proper order lest chaos reign. Thanks to his foresight and our persistence, his legacy is preserved, and justice served. A solemn silence followed, broken only by the distant toll of the church bell. The first rays of sun filtered through curtained windows, illuminating the manuscript's golden lettering. Poirot inclined his head in farewell. "I shall take my leave now, Zamis. May you find peace in truth's embrace." One by one, Captain Bancroft escorted each suspect to the awaiting police carriage, offering quiet words of reassurance. Lady Evesham lingered for a moment, clasping the manuscript to her chest. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "how can I ever thank you?" Poirot's small smile was enigmatic. "Vous n'avez quoi vivre la vérité, madame, live the truth." With that, he touched his hat and departed, footsteps echoing down the corridor in the drawing-room. The manuscript rested on the center table, its pages finally free to speak the whole story. Outside, the rose bushes stirred in the gentle morning breeze, petals unfurling in quiet tribute to secrets laid bare and a mystery brought to its rightful conclusion. The final piece had indeed fallen into place, illuminating the path from deception to redemption under the watchful eye of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 15. The final gathering by mid-morning. The drawing-room of number 17 Primrose Lane had been restored to its accustomed grandeur, the rosewood furniture polished, drapes drawn back to admit soft sunlight, and the faint scent of freshly cut blooms drifting from the vases upon the mantel. Yet beneath the veneer of normalcy lay a current of apprehension. Word had spread quickly among the household that Hercule Poirot intended to assemble the remaining guests and household staff for one final audience. Before the mystery's ultimate resolution, Lady Rosalind Evesham stood near the window, smoothing the pleats of her mourning gown, her expression composed but her eyes betraying fatigue. Captain Bancroft hovered at her side, kneading his gloved hands as he periodically cast anxious glances toward the door. Sir Lionel Carrington and Mr. Harold Kemp entered together, each bearing a polite nod to Lady Montfort, who made a solitary adjustment to the arrangement of cushions upon the chaise longue. All wore expressions of respectful deference. Yet each bore an undercurrent of tension-silent questions about what Poirot would reveal. At precisely 10 o'clock, Poirot appeared in the doorway, his posture impeccable and his moustaches immaculately waxed. Behind him followed Mrs. Hawkins, carrying a small writing desk and a silver tray bearing the essential props, the crystal decanter, the fountain pen, the hidden blotter, and, most significant of all, a single folded sheet of parchment on which the final sequence of events had been meticulously inscribed. "Monsieur," Lady Evesham murmured, advancing with gentle grace, "you wish to see us?" Poirot inclined his head in greeting. "Madam, messieurs, thank you for your punctuality. We are here to reconstruct the events of that fateful midnight hour, to allow each clue its proper place, and to lay bare the path by which the murderer struck and nearly slipped away." He gestured to the writing desk, which Mrs. Hawkins positioned at the room's center. Please be seated, if you will. The 5 remaining participants, Lady Montfort, Sir Lionel Carrington, Mr. Kemp, Captain Bancroft, and Lady Eversham took their places in a semicircle, each just within earshot of Poirot. "Let us begin, Mzamas," Poirot said, settling into a mahogany chair. At 11:15 p.m., Captain Bancroft arrived, invited by Lady Eversham's urgent summons. He was accompanied shortly thereafter by Lady Montfort and Sir Lionel Carrington, each bearing their own concerns. He tapped the fountain pen. At 11:45, Lady Montfort fetched cream from the pantry, passing through the corridor now known to bear orchid petals. This corridor would later prove critical in tracing our culprit's movements. Lady Montfort drew in a breath. She nodded slightly, eyes downcast. "That is correct, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot continued. At the stroke of midnight, Lady Eversham escorted Captain Bancroft to the study where he discovered the body. The poison, of course, had already been administered. He lifted the crystal decanter. The decanter was then lifted and set back. Its contents have consumed a staged act to mislead us regarding the point of administration. He gestured to Mr. Kemp. "Mr. Kemp, you retrieved your briefcase from the hallway table in hopes of securing the will, but discovered it missing. You reported this immediately to Captain Bancroft." Mr. Kemp bowed his head. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot nodded and turned to Sir Lionel. "Sir Lionel, you admitted to visiting the study moments before the crime, ostensibly to plead with Sir Reginald regarding his memoirs. Your footprints were found outside the study door bare, pressing deeply into the petals of the dog rosebush." He allowed the moment to linger. "I steady." Sir Lionel's jaw tightened. "Yes, Monsieur." Shortly thereafter, Poirot went on, Dr. Sinclair, or rather, one who later proved her culpability, entered the chamber, gloves removed and replaced with lavender-scented ones to obscure her prints on the blotter. He tapped the blotter. These gloves left traces of lavender oil and gold dust upon the paper, while their previous wearer bore orchid pollen in the corridor, before the group could respond. The bell over the front door jingled softly. Mrs. Hawkins entered, followed by Miss Agnes and the 2 footmen. All wore solemn expressions and carried small trays bearing artifacts, a pair of violet powder-stained gloves, the brass bureau key, and a single blackened rose petal, preserved under glass. Poirot rose smoothly. "Your presence is most timely. If you will present these items." The servants placed the trays upon a side table. Poirot ran a gloved finger across the gloves, then lifted the bureau key. This key, used to open Lady Eversham's private bureau, was found discarded in the corridor. It links the solicitor's momentary search to an attempt at misdirection. And this petal, he held it aloft. The charred edge marks the point where our culprit sought to burn the cipher after initial discovery. He laid the petal beside the decanter and turned back to the group. Thus we see the pattern of entry and exit, corridor to study to pantry to bureau, with only one person traversing them, all under cover of darkness. Lady Eversham clasped her hands. "But Monsieur Poirot, who among us walked that route so precisely?" Poirot's gaze settled on each face in turn. "We shall soon know. But first, let us recount the cipher's significance." He retrieved the folded parchment and placed it upon the blotter. Unfolding it, he read in a measured tone, "At midnight, the roses speak, in petals and in shadows. Truth you seek, follow the notches. Trace the code, behind the shells, the secret abode." He paused, then traced the notches along the blotter's edge with a fingertip. "This rhyme guided me to the hidden chamber. There I found Sir Reginald's final regrets, his confession in manuscript, and the vial of cyanide intended for himself. Had events taken their intended course?" He glanced round the room. "Now, Mzamas, We stand at the threshold of revelation. Each of you has handled evidence. Each has walked a path through these corridors. But only one climbed into desperation and took a life not his own. He allowed his gaze to rest on Lady Montfort, then Sir Lionel, then Mr. Kemp, and finally on Captain Bancroft, and only one wore two pairs of gloves to mask her identity. And left the blackened petal as the final, fragile witness. The group shifted in their seats. Captain Bancroft's hand moved instinctively to the revolver at his side, though he knew better than to draw it within these walls. Lady Eversham's hand tightened on her lace handkerchief. Sir Lionel swallowed hard. Mr. Kemp's spectacles caught the light as he blinked rapidly. Poirot rose slowly. In a moment, I shall announce who speaks for the Roses and who remains silent. But before I do, I invite any final admissions, any words you wish to share. He folded his hands over the blotter and waited. A heavy silence ensued, broken only by the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. Then Sir Lionel spoke, voice hoarse. "Monsieur Poirot, if I might." Poirot inclined his head. "Yes, Sir Lionel." Sir Lionel lifted his gaze. "I confess that I feared loss of reputation, but I did not kill him. If the truth must fall upon one, let it be upon me for driving others to desperation." Poirot's eyes flickered, but he remained silent. Lady Montfort then leaned forward. "And I, too, hold guilt for my secrecy, but not for bloodshed." Mr. Kemp offered a trembling nod. Captain Bancroft glared at his revolver. "And willing to confess more." Lady Eversham turned to Miss Agnes, who stood nearby, and shook her head, indicating she had nothing further to add. Poirot straightened. "Thank you, Miss. Your courage in speaking confirms the sincerity of your remorse. Now," he paused, dramatically, lifting his cane, "let the roses speak." He pointed to the single black petal beside the candle flame. "This petal represents the one who betrayed mercy for a fear. That person is Dr. Beatrice Sinclair." He turned toward the closed door, voice low but unwavering. As the officers to fetch her, footsteps sounded in the hall. Mrs. Hawkins bowed, exiting swiftly. The assembled guests exchanged glances, relief, apprehension, and something akin to grief mingling in their expressions. Poirot surveyed them with quiet finality. In moments, the truth will stand revealed. He sank into his chair, ready to hear the step, the confession, the final word that would bring closure to the gathering of roses and to the mystery that had wrapped Primrose Lane in its thorny embrace. Chapter 16. The reveal. A hush fell over the drawing-room as the door swung open, admitting two uniformed officers flanking Dr. Beatrice Sinclair. Her expression was a pale mask of dread and resignation. Lady Rosalind Eversham rose and drew Captain Bancroft's arm round her shoulders. Sir Lionel Carrington and Mr. Kemp shifted in their seats, anxious anticipation etched on their faces. Lady Montfort closed her eyes briefly. Bracing herself, Hercule Poirot stood and bowed politely. "Madam Sinclair," he intoned, "you have heard the roses speak. Now, I invite you to take the stand and listen carefully as I recount the truth of that midnight hour." Dr. Sinclair's gaze stayed fixed on Poirot's waistcoat button. He began, voice calm yet commanding. "At exactly 11:59, you slipped from the chamanoir, where you had burned the cipher sheet in the small stove. You extinguished the embers with water drawn from the fountain, removing your leather gloves, then donned the lavender-scented pet to confuse the scent of cyanide at the study desk." He paused, letting the weight of that image settle. "Entering the study, you found Sir Reginald correcting proofs of his memoirs. He greeted you, surprised and at that moment. You administered the poison." Poirot turned to Lady Eversham. "Madam, you testified that the body bore no defensive wounds. He never saw his assailant's face." Lady Eversham's eyes watered, but she nodded. Poirot continued, You replaced the fountain pen on the blotter, smearing your latex gloves. To give the impression of penmanship, then rearranged the blotter slightly to accommodate your haste. As you left, you pocketed the locket, hoping to misdirect suspicion toward Lady Montfort. Lady Montfort's breath caught. Poirot's gaze flicked to her. You believed the locket would implicate your cousin, who alone could claim such intimacy with Sir Reginald. Then, addressing Sir Lionel, he said, "Sir Lionel, you witnessed your friend's final moments, his outstretched hand clutching yours, and you turned away, too stunned to intervene. You followed Dr. Sinclair out of genuine concern, not knowing she carried the truth wrapped in under." Sir Lionel's face contorted with regret. Poirot nodded and shifted to Mr. Kemp. "Mr. Kemp, you arrived shortly after, summoned by the cry. You found the penned blotter, but you too were blinded by shock and perhaps by fear for your own interests in his will." Mr. Kemp bit his lip, but did not speak. Poirot then faced the room. Yet only one mind possessed both the knowledge of cyanide scent and the presence of lavender wool. The dexterity to operate a hidden blotter compartment key, and the motive born of threatened exposure. Dr. Sinclair, you recognized the black hybrid rose's petal as the one Sir Reginald mentioned in his journal, where the silent heart might speak. That knowledge alone led you to utter those final words. He removed the fountain pen and held it aloft. "At midnight, the roses speak." You borrowed those words from Lady Eversham's private rhyme, which you once read among her papers. You then staged the scene to implicate her, Lady Montfort, even the governess. He placed the pen on the table. Dr. Sinclair's posture sagged. Her voice came in a tremor. "It was never meant to be permanent. I only wanted to scare him, make him promise to retract his memoirs, to protect us both." Poirot stepped closer, his tone softening. "But you administered a fatal dose of cyanide, a poison that leaves no time for repentance in your panic. You attempted to destroy evidence here." He tapped the manuscript, "and in the chamber, nowhere, then flee through the secret passage." He nodded toward the servants, who withdrew the bent key and blackened petal, displaying them as silent witnesses. Poirot turned back to Dr. Sinclair. "Your fatal mistake, a single drop too much, could not be undone by any staging. Sir Reginald's intelligent mind discerned your fear before he even spoke his final words. His hidden chamber, his ciphered poem, his preserved petal, each was a tender warning meant to guide me to you." Dr. Sinclair bowed her. Had the officers stepped forward and gently placed her in handcuffs. As they led her away, she whispered, "Forgive me, Rosalind." Lady Eversham's hand flew too. Her mouth. Captain Bancroft stepped forward, voice hushed. "Madam, he would wish for mercy." He glanced at Poirot. Poirot bowed slightly. "Madam, true mercy lies not in covering sin, but in acknowledging it." He faced the assembled. This case a tapestry of love, betrayal, and fear unfolded with precision and poetry. Sir Reginald's final act was not suicide, but revelation. He entrusted me with his rose's secret, and now, through his cipher, we have found justice. A soft murmur of assent rippled through the room. Lady Montfort stepped to Lady Eversham's side, offering quiet support. Sir Lionel sank into a chair, grief and relief mingling in his expression. Mr. Kemp wiped his spectacles as if to clear his vision of the horrors laid bare. Poirot cleared his throat. "We have one final task, to ensure Sir Reginald's memoirs see the light, unaltered. Madam, I trust you shall honour his last wish." Lady Eversham stepped forward, placing a hand on the open manuscript. "I will, Monsieur Poirot. His truth will endure." Poirot inclined his head. "Then my work is done." He surveyed the room one last time. "May the roses speak no more in death, but live on in memory, each petal a testament to truth's triumph over fear." With that, Poirot turned and departed, leaving the household to reckon with their losses, their loves, and the enduring power of a single blackened petal. The roses at Primrose Lane had spoken, and at last their secrets were laid to rest. Chapter 17. Outcome. And just as the late morning sunlight filtered through the lace curtains of the drawing-room, casting gentle patterns upon the polished floorboards, outside, the rose garden glowed with fresh dew, each petal refracting light like a jewel. Within number 17 Primrose Lane, a solemn calm had settled after the storm of midnight revelations. Only 5 figures remained in the room: Lady Rosalind Eversham, Captain Arthur Bancroft, Lady Montford, Sir Lionel Carrington, and Mr. Harold Kemp, each bearing the weight of what had transpired. Lady Eversham stood by the mantelpiece, the bound memoirs of Sir Reginald clasped reverently to her chest. Captain Bancroft watched her with quiet devotion, ready to defend her honour against any who might misunderstand. Poirot, having bowed his final farewell, had already slipped away to oversee Dr. Sinclair's formal rest. Now, the household turned its attention to the administration of justice and the shaping of new beginnings from the ruins of tragedy. A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of Inspector Foley, accompanied by 2 constables. The inspector, sombre and methodical, entered the room with Lieutenant Peregrine Hawkins, the local magistrate's aide. They bowed in respect to Lady Eversham, and acknowledged the others with curt nods. Lady Eversham. Inspector Foley began, voice gentle yet firm. By order of His Majesty's Court, Dr. Beatrice Sinclair will be conveyed to Caxton Gaol to await trial for the wilful murder of Sir Reginald Eversham. He laid a formal warrant upon the small writing desk. The evidence presented by Monsieur Poirot and the subsequent confession renders further delay unnecessary. Lady Eversham inclined her head. "Thank you, Inspector. I trust her treatment will be just." Her voice quivered, but did not break. Inspector Foley offered a sympathetic glance. "We shall ensure her rights are observed. In the meantime, these memoirs require safekeeping." He gestured to the manuscript. Lieutenant Hawkins stepped forward and placed the document in a protective leather carrier, duly signed and witnessed by Sir Lionel and Mr. Kemp. Captain Bancroft stepped to Lady Eversham's side. "Madam, if there is anything I can do," she laid a gentle hand upon his arm. "You have done more than enough. Arthur, your courage and loyalty brought the truth to light." Sir Lionel Carrington, standing a respectful distance away, cleared his throat. "Lady Eversham, with your permission, I will oversee the publication of Sir Reginald's memoirs on behalf of the family." His voice was measured, regret colouring each word. "Though I played a part in these troubles, I remain his executor and must see his final wishes fulfilled." Lady Eversham offered him a faint, gracious smile. "Thank you, Lionel. I know you acted under duress, but Reginald trusted you once. Perhaps this task will honour his memory." Mr. Harold Kemp, spectacles perched low on his nose, stepped forward. "I too will assist. My duties as solicitor compel me to ensure all legal matters are in order: wills, bequests, and the necessary formalities." "I appreciate that, Harold," Lady Eversham replied. "Your professionalism, though tested, has remained steadfast." Poirot returned at that moment, greeting the group with a nod. "Samus, I trust the authorities have been satisfied." His tone was gentle, his presence at once reassuring and final. Inspector Foley inclined his head. "Monsieur Poirot, your guidance has been invaluable. Dr. Sinclair is en route to the station house." "We shall proceed without further challenge." Poirot's mustaches quivered ever so slightly. "Excellent. Now, madam, if I may offer a final counsel, live in the light of truth, as Sir Reginald desired." He turned to the others. "Each of you has been tested by circumstance and choice. May you find redemption through honesty and service to his legacy." Lady Montfort approached, smoothing her dark gown. "Monsieur Poirot, I owe you my deepest thanks. You preserved the dignity of all involved, even mine, which I feared forever damaged. Poirot inclined his head courteously. Madam, your remorse was genuine. That is the first step toward atonement. Sir Lionel cleared his throat. Monsieur, do you think, is it wise to publish all the confessions? Some matters were meant to die with Reginald. Poirot's gaze was gentle but firm honesty. Can wound, but it also heals. Reginald's wish was that no secret remain unspoken. The public deserves to know the full story of scandal and redemption alike. Sir Lionel inhaled and nodded slowly. Then so be it. Captain Bancroft stepped between Sir Lionel and Lady Evesham. Madam, shall I help you take these memoirs to the library for safekeeping? He offered his arm. Lady Evesham accepted. Thank you, Arthur. As they departed toward the library, Poirot turned to Mr. Kemp. Might I rely on your counsel in the legal particulars, Monsieur? Mr. Kemp inclined his head. Certainly, Monsieur Poirot. I shall ensure everything is executed correctly. Poirot's eyes met Miss Agnes's across the room. She had slipped in quietly, carrying a silver tray with teacups and a pot of tea. He nodded to her. She set the tray on a side table, then bowed and withdrew. As the soft clink of porcelain echoed, Lady Montfort approached. I shall remain here to oversee the final arrangements. Poirot smiled. Very good, madam. And now, if you will excuse me, I must return to my lodgings and prepare my report to Scotland Yard. He placed a comforting hand on Lady Montfort's shoulder. Take heart. This ordeal binds us all in service to truth. With that, Hercule Poirot took his leave, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. The remaining four resumed their tasks. Lady Evesham and Captain Bancroft escorted the manuscript to the library. Sir Lionel and Mr. Kemp witnessed signatures and seals, and Miss Agnes awaited with refreshments for those who remained. In the hushed grandeur of Primrose Lane, justice had been served not only through the arrest of the guilty party, but through the restoration of integrity among the living. The roses in the courtyard, freshly watered by the morning dew, seemed to stand as silent sentinels over the house, their blooms reflecting both sorrow and hope beneath their watch. The household began its path toward healing, each character forever changed by the revelations and bound together by a shared commitment to uphold Sir Reginald's final testament. And so, at last, outcome and justice were laid upon the foundations of truth, ensuring that the memory of number 17 Primrose Lane would endure untainted by deceit and honored through the courage of those who listened when the roses spoke. Chapter 18. The closing remark. Late that afternoon, Hercule Poirot stood upon the gravel forecourt of number 17 Primrose Lane, his gaze upon the rose garden beyond. The sun's golden warmth washed over the dukest petals, casting long, tranquil shadows across the pathway. All had been set aright. Sir Reginald's memoirs were safely en route to the publisher. Dr. Beatrice Sinclair had been formally committed for trial, and Lady Rosalind Evesham, her spirit tempered by grief and gratitude, prepared to rebuild her life upon the bedrock of truth. Captain Bancroft approached, his military bearing softened by an arm draped round Lady Evesham's shoulders. Sir Lionel Carrington, solemn but resolute, emerged from the doorway with Mr. Harold Kemp, who carried the leather-bound carrier of the confiscated confession letters. All paused as Poirot turned to them, his small frame silhouetted against the bloom of roses. "My friends," he began, voice gentle yet resonant, "we have witnessed how secrets can fester like thorns, and how courage can bloom as petals in the light of honesty. Sir Reginald's design was masterful. His cipher, his hidden chamber, even his blackened rose petal, all served to guide us unerringly to the heart of the matter." Lady Evesham stepped forward, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and strength. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "you have given me the greatest gift of all, clarity, though we have lost much. "We have saved the truth," Poirot inclined his head. "Madam, the truth is an ever-precious thing. It does not diminish memory. It honors it. Sir Reginald would have wished for clarity above all." Sir Lionel cleared his throat. "Monsieur, I on behalf of all involved thank you. Without you, this house would forever be haunted by suspicion." Poirot's moustache twitched in a faint smile. "I am merely a humble servant of justice's course. Yet justice thrives not only in courts, but also in the quiet crit of those who choose transparency over secrecy." Mr. Kemp, adjusting his spectacles, added, "And you have ensured that Sir Reginald's legacy remains untarnished. His memoirs, revealing both virtue and folly, will stand as testament to the complexities of human character." "Indeed," Poirot replied, "for what is a life but a tapestry woven of triumphs and failures, of love and regret? We owe it to those we have loved to present their full portraits and all." Lady Montfort emerged from the front hall, pausing at the garden gate. Her face showed traces of tears, but also newfound resolve. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, voice steadier than before, "I owe you my deepest gratitude. I have learned that concealment of affection can be as harmful as deception." "You speak wisely, madam," Poirot responded. "To love and to be loved without shame is among life's greatest blessings. I trust you will find peace in the open remembrance of your connection to Sir Reginald," with a final collective nod. The small party began to disperse. Captain Bancroft escorted Lady Eversham back inside. Sir Lionel and Mr. Kemp carried the precious documents toward the library, and Lady Montfort lingered a moment by the roses, gently brushing a thorn's tip against her fingers, this time without pain. But as a reminder of the trials overcome, Poirot remained alone at the garden's edge, surveying the bloom of crimson and white. Each rose a silent sentinel. He adjusted his bow tie and smoothed his waistcoat. In that moment, the silence spoke louder than any confession. "Arms, roses," he murmured. "You have spoken at last, and your words were justice, mercy, and forgiveness intertwined." He placed a gloved hand over his heart, as though pledging fealty to the memory of Sir Reginald and to the steadfast pursuit of truth. Then, with the elegance befitting his reputation, Hercule Poirot turned on his heel and strolled toward the gate. At the threshold, he paused and cast one last look over his shoulder. The sunlight caught the dew on the petals, igniting them like embers of a final revelation. Poirot raised a single finger in salute. "Until we meet again, Primrose Lane," he whispered. "May your roses speak only of hope." With that, Hercule Poirot stepped into the late afternoon light and vanished down the winding lane, leaving behind a household forever changed, a garden forever sanctified by truth, and a mystery laid to rest in the gentle closure of a master detective's parting words.